You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. What if I told you that the weakness you feel is because you lack confidence, discipline, or intelligence, but because your mind has been trained to leak power in ways you don't even notice? You wake up motivated, yet one comment, one rejection, one moment of doubt is enough to knock you off balance. You overthink. You hesitate. You replay conversations in your head. And slowly, without realizing it, your mind becomes the very thing holding you back. The Stoics discovered something brutal and liberating at the same time. Weakness is not a personality flaw, it's a mental habit, and habits can be unlearned. In this video, you're about to uncover 10 Stoic truths that cut straight through fear, emotional dependence, and mental fragility. These aren't motivational slogans. They're timeless principles forged in chaos, tested by emperors, exiles, and warriors who faced loss, betrayal, and uncertainty daily, yet remained unshakable. If you've ever felt mentally drained, easily disturbed, or silently frustrated with yourself, this video is for you. Watch until the very end, because the final truth is the one most people never hear, and once you understand it, weakness loses its grip on your mind permanently. Number 1, you control your judgments, not external events. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Wasn't offering poetry, he was handing you a weapon. Right now, whether you realize it or not, your sense of strength or weakness rises and falls based on what you think is happening to you, not what is actually happening, what you decide it means. That distinction matters more than almost anything else you will ever learn. Because the moment you confuse events with judgments, you hand control of your inner state to the outside world. And the outside world is chaotic, indifferent, and unreliable. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that weakness doesn't come from pressure, loss, silence, rejection, or uncertainty. Weakness comes from the story you attach to those things, the interpretation, the inner commentary you let run unchecked. You don't control what appears in your life. That part is settled, but you absolutely control how you label it, how long you dwell on it, and whether you turn it into a personal verdict against yourself. Epictetus put it bluntly, men are disturbed not by things but by the views which they take of things. Sit with that. If that's true, and it is, then every emotional spike you experience is not proof of powerlessness. It's proof of authorship. You are writing the meaning in real time. And that means you can rewrite it. Most people never pause between stimulus and judgment. Something happens and the mind immediately declares, "This is bad, this is unfair, this means something about me." That reflex feels automatic, but it isn't fixed, it's trained. And anything trained can be retrained. Strength begins the moment you slow the process down. When something hits your awareness, instead of reacting, you say, internally, calmly, "This is an impression, not a fact." Repeated this discipline constantly. He reminded himself that the mind's first reaction is rarely accurate and almost never useful. Here's a practice you can start today. When a thought arises that tightens your chest or pulls your energy downward, don't argue with it, don't suppress it, label it. Simply say, "This is a judgment forming." That small act creates distance. Distance creates choice. And choice is where strength lives. You are no longer inside the thought. You are observing it. From there, you decide whether it deserves your belief. Another exercise, one that builds mental calluses, is to strip events of language. No adjectives, no narrative, just raw perception. Not "this is humiliating," not "this is threatening," not "this is proof I'm failing." Just "this occurred." Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and this is exactly what he meant. The mind inflates, dramatizes, predicts. When you remove interpretation, emotional intensity collapses. Not instantly, but reliably. You'll notice something uncomfortable when you start doing this. Part of you resists letting go of judgment because judgment feels like control. It feels like engagement, but it's a false sense of power. Real control is quieter, colder, more deliberate. The Stoic path isn't about becoming numb, it's about becoming ungovernable. When you stop outsourcing your emotional state to circumstances, you become steady in a way most people never experience. Now here's where action matters. Knowing this idea intellectually won't change you. You have to practice it when you don't feel like it, especially then. Each morning, take 30 seconds and remind yourself, today, events will happen. My task is not to manage them, but to manage my judgments. That single sentence reframes your entire day. At night, review not what happened, but where you surrendered your judgment without questioning it. No self-attack, no guilt, just awareness. Progress lives there. Over time, something shifts. You stop feeling rushed to react. Silence becomes easier. Emotional restraint stops feeling like suppression and starts feeling like authority. You realize that nothing external has the power to weaken you unless you grant it permission. That realization is liberating, but it's also demanding. Because once you see that judgments are your responsibility, excuses evaporate. This is the Stoic truth that removes weakness at the root, not by hardening you, but by clarifying you. You are not here to control the world. You are here to govern yourself. And when you do, strength stops being something you chase. It becomes something you stand in. Number 2, emotional pain comes from interpretation, not reality. Emotional pain doesn't arrive fully formed. It isn't injected into you by events, people, or circumstances. It's constructed quietly, automatically, by the meaning you assign to what happens. The Stoics understood this with brutal clarity. Epictetus said it plainly, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." Read that again, slowly. Let it land. What hurts you is not the situation itself, but the story you tell yourself about it. And the moment you truly grasp that, weakness begins to lose its grip on your mind. Right now, you may feel as if emotions simply happen to you, like weather rolling in without warning. But that belief is part of the trap. The Stoic view is far more empowering, though it demands responsibility. You are not a passive container for feelings. You are an interpreter. Every sensation passes through your judgment before it becomes suffering. Between stimulus and distress, there is a choice, often unconscious, often habitual, but a choice nonetheless. The Stoics didn't promise comfort, they offered freedom. And freedom begins when you stop confusing perception with truth. Notice how quickly your mind labels things: good, bad, unfair, disrespectful, threatening. These labels feel instant, but they're learned reflexes, not facts. Warned himself daily. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. Power to revoke, not someday, not after years of healing, at any moment. That line alone should make you pause and reconsider how much authority you've been giving away. You don't need to suppress emotion. That's not stoicism, that's denial. What you need is to slow the process down, to create space between what happens and what you decide it means. Emotional weakness thrives in speed. It feeds on instant reactions, on unchecked assumptions, on the belief that your first interpretation must be correct. Strength, on the other hand, is quiet. It asks questions. It withholds judgment. It waits. Here, where the work becomes practical. Begin by treating every emotional spike as a signal, not a verdict. When discomfort arises, don't ask, "Why does this hurt?" Ask, "What interpretation am I accepting right now?" Not the loud one, the subtle one, the underlying assumption. The Stoics trained themselves to strip events down to their raw form, no added commentary, no emotional coloring, just facts. You can do the same. It's uncomfortable at first because it removes familiar narratives. But that discomfort is the sound of weakness dissolving. Adopt this daily exercise. When emotion flares, pause and mentally describe the situation in the most neutral terms possible. No adjectives, no judgments, just strip down reality. Then notice how the emotional charge weakens. Not disappears, weakens. That's progress. That's control returning to you. This practice isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming precise. Precision is power. Another practice: challenge the certainty of your interpretations. The mind loves certainty, especially negative certainty. It clings to conclusions because conclusions feel safe. But the Stoics knew that certainty without examination is a liability. When you feel emotional pain, deliberately introduce doubt, not self-doubt, but doubt. Say to yourself, "This is one possible explanation, not the explanation." That single sentence creates flexibility, and flexibility is the opposite of fragility. You'll notice something important as you do this consistently. The same situations that once drained you will begin to feel lighter, not because the world changed, but because you did. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Most of your pain is preloaded, anticipated, rehearsed, replayed. Once you stop feeding imagination with unquestioned interpretations, emotional suffering loses its fuel. Make this a habit, not a one-time insight. Train your mind the way you would train your body, through repetition, not inspiration. Each time you choose interpretation over reaction, you reinforce strength. Each time you delay judgment, you weaken old patterns. This is mental discipline, not positive thinking. It's not about forcing optimism. It's about refusing to lie to yourself. And here's the quiet reward no one talks about. When you stop interpreting everything as a personal threat or loss, your presence changes. You become steadier, less reactive, more grounded. People feel it even if they can't explain it. That calm isn't indifference, it's sovereignty. You're no longer ruled by every thought that passes through your mind. Return often to this Stoic truth. Write it down, repeat it, live it. Emotional pain comes from interpretation, not reality. If you want a stronger mind, stop negotiating with every feeling. Question it, examine it, train yourself to see clearly. Because the moment you master your interpretations, the world loses its power to weaken you, and you finally begin to move through life on your own terms. Number 3, self-discipline is the foundation of true freedom. Self-discipline is the foundation of true freedom, even though most people are taught the opposite. You're told that freedom means doing whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like it. But deep down, you already know how fragile that version of freedom is. It collapses the moment impulse takes over. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. They saw that the undisciplined mind isn't free at all. It's reactive, restless, and quietly enslaved. When wrote, "You become what you give your attention to," he wasn't offering poetry. He was issuing a warning. Your mind becomes shaped by what you allow to rule it. If impulses decide, you follow. If discipline decides, you lead. Self-discipline isn't about restriction, it's about direction. It's choosing what governs you before something else does. When you don't choose, urges choose for you. Moods choose for you. Comfort chooses for you. And none of those things care about your long-term strength. Epictetus was blunt about this. No man is free who is not master of himself. Read that again slowly. Freedom begins internally, not externally. You don't gain it by removing obstacles, but by removing dependence. The moment you stop needing every craving answered, every emotion indulged, every thought obeyed, something powerful happens. Your mind becomes quieter. Your actions become deliberate. You stop leaking energy in 1,000 directions. You don't build discipline through intensity. You build it through consistency. That's the part most people miss. They wait for motivation, for the perfect moment, for a surge of willpower. The Stoics would have smiled at that excuse. Discipline is practiced when you don't feel like it, especially then. Seneca warned that the worst slavery is voluntary slavery, when you hand control of your inner life to habits you didn't consciously choose. Every time you delay an urge instead of obeying it, you strengthen a muscle no one can see but everyone can feel. You're telling your mind, I decide. That message compounds. Here, where it gets personal, you already practice discipline, just not always in the right direction. You discipline yourself to procrastinate. You discipline yourself to avoid discomfort. You discipline yourself to repeat patterns that drain you. The Stoic move is not to add more effort, but to redirect it. Ask yourself daily, what am I training myself to tolerate? What am I rehearsing with my thoughts? Because repetition is education. Your mind is always learning, whether you're intentional or not. Start with small, deliberate constraints, not because they matter in isolation, but because they reshape how you relate to desire. Choose one moment each day where you pause before acting, just a pause. In that space, breathe, observe the urge without labeling it good or bad, and let it pass. This is straight from Stoic practice. Observation without attachment. You're not suppressing, you're mastering. Over time, that pause becomes a choice point, and choice is where freedom lives. Another exercise, begin and end your day with conscious review. In the morning, set a single internal standard, not a task, but a quality. Calm, restraint, focus. In the evening, review without judgment. Did you act from that standard or from impulse? Did this relentlessly, not to shame himself, but to refine himself? You're not aiming for perfection, you're aiming for awareness. Awareness sharpens discipline faster than guilt ever could. Self-discipline also means refusing to negotiate with weakness when it shows up dressed as logic. The mind is clever when it wants comfort. It creates reasons, stories, exceptions. The Stoics called this false assent, agreeing with thoughts that don't deserve agreement. You don't have to fight every thought. You just have to stop believing all of them. Practice saying internally, this is an impression, not an order. That single sentence can interrupt entire spirals. Over time, something shifts. You stop feeling controlled by urgency. You stop mistaking desire for necessity. You gain what the Stoics called inner citadel, a place inside you that remains untouched by chaos. Seneca wrote, "The greatest power is to be self-possessed." That's what discipline gives you. Not hardness, not coldness, possession of yourself. This kind of freedom doesn't announce itself loudly. It feels like steadiness, like space between stimulus and response, like moving through the world without being dragged by it. And once you taste that, even briefly, you'll want more, not because you're chasing pleasure, but because you're reclaiming authorship of your own mind. So start today, not tomorrow, not when conditions improve. Choose one impulse you'll no longer obey automatically. Choose one habit you'll perform even when resistance whispers. Choose to train your mind the way a Stoic would, quietly, persistently, without drama. Because every act of discipline is a vote for freedom. And every day you practice it, weakness loosens its grip. Number 4, detachment from outcomes eliminates fear. Detachment from outcomes is one of those Stoic ideas that sounds simple until you try to live it. And yet, the moment you begin to practice it, even imperfectly, you feel something loosen inside you. Fear starts to lose its grip. Anxiety stops shouting. You realize that much of what drained your energy was never the effort itself, but your obsession with how things had to turn out. Said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Read that slowly, then read it again. The fear you feel is not caused by the outcome you're imagining, it's caused by your attachment to it. You've been taught, subtly and relentlessly, to measure yourself by results, win or lose, approved or rejected, successful or forgotten, and without noticing you handed your peace over to forces you don't control. The Stoics saw this as mental bondage. Epictetus was blunt. Some things are up to you and some things are not. The mistake is mixing the two. When you tie your sense of worth to outcomes, you live in constant negotiation with fate. Detachment breaks that contract. It doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You act fully, but you stop demanding guarantees from life. Here's the shift you need to make, and it starts today. You don't detach from effort. You detach from expectation, you still show up, you still apply yourself, you still commit, but you stop gripping the future with white knuckles. Fear feeds on the illusion that you must control results to be safe. Detachment starves that illusion. When the outcome no longer defines you, it no longer threatens you. Seneca warned that he who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. Most fear lives in advance. Detachment pulls you back into the only place where strength exists, this moment. You'll notice resistance at first. Your mind will say, if I don't care about outcomes, I'll become weak. That's conditioning talking. The Stoics knew the opposite was true. The person who can act without emotional dependence on results is unshakable. They are harder to manipulate, harder to intimidate, harder to destabilize. When nothing external can add to or subtract from your inner stability, fear loses its leverage. You stop asking, what if it goes wrong? And start asking, what is mine to do right now? That question alone changes how you move through the world. Practice this daily, not as a theory but as a discipline. Each morning, remind yourself that today you will control your intentions, your actions, and your responses, nothing else. Say it plainly. Write it if you have to. When your mind drifts toward imagined outcomes, gently pull it back, not with force, with clarity. That part is not mine. This is not avoidance. It's mental hygiene. Trained himself to release outcomes repeatedly, not once. Detachment is built through repetition, not insight. Another exercise is to deliberately rehearse acceptance. Not pessimism, acceptance. Quietly tell yourself that whatever happens, you will meet it with composure. You are not predicting failure. You are removing fear's favorite weapon, surprise. The Stoics called this premeditation of adversity, not to scare the mind, but to prepare it. When you do this correctly, fear weakens because it realizes it can no longer ambush you. You've already decided that your character remains intact regardless of the result. You'll also need to watch how often you seek emotional rewards from outcomes. Praise, validation, relief. These are subtle attachments. When you notice yourself chasing them, pause, breathe, re-anchor yourself in effort alone. Ask yourself whether you acted with integrity, discipline, and restraint. If the answer is yes, the outcome becomes secondary. This takes time, but every time you choose principle over payoff, your mind grows quieter, stronger, less reactive. Detachment doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means feelings no longer command you. You may still prefer certain outcomes. That's human. The difference is that preference no longer becomes desperation. Fear thrives in desperation. Remove that, and fear becomes background noise instead of a controlling voice. Epictetus reminded his students that freedom is not getting what you want, but wanting what aligns with reason. That's the heart of this truth. You are not here to bend reality to your will. You are here to master your response to it. Commit to this as a daily practice. Catch yourself when you start bargaining with the future. Release the demand, return to action, return to effort, return to what is yours. Over time, you'll notice a profound change. Decisions become cleaner. Anxiety fades faster. You stop freezing at crossroads. Detachment from outcomes doesn't make life smaller. It makes you larger than fear. And once fear no longer runs your mind, weakness has nowhere left to hide. Number 5, needing validation, is a form of mental slavery. Needing validation is a form of mental slavery because the moment you hand your sense of worth to something outside you, you quietly place chains around your own mind. The Stoics warned against this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Wrote that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and that this you have the power to revoke. Read that again slowly. If your confidence rises and falls based on approval, praise, attention, or agreement, then your inner state is no longer yours. It belongs to the crowd, and crowds are unstable, inconsistent, and impossible to satisfy. You feel this every time your mood shifts because someone reacts differently than you hoped, or when silence feels heavier than criticism. That discomfort isn't weakness, it's a signal. A signal that your mind has been trained to look outward for permission to feel solid. Here's the uncomfortable part you need to face without flinching. Validation feels good, but it weakens you over time. It conditions you to wait, to hesitate, to adjust yourself instead of standing firm. Seneca warned that the man who lives for applause is never free because he is always performing. When you seek validation, you are no longer acting from conviction, you're acting from anticipation. You're constantly asking, how will this be received? Instead of, is this aligned with who I choose to be? That single shift drains your energy, dulls your edge, and fragments your attention. You stop listening to your own judgment. You outsource it. If you're honest, you already know how exhausting this is. The mind becomes noisy. Thoughts multiply. Doubt creeps in. You replay moments, adjust your inner narrative, and quietly negotiate with yourself about what you should or shouldn't feel. The Stoics would call this a loss of inner sovereignty. Epictetus was blunt about it. If you want to be invincible, make sure nothing outside your own reason has the power to disturb you. That's not poetic philosophy. That's a practical survival rule for the mind. So let's talk about what to do, because awareness without action is just another form of avoidance. The first habit you must adopt is learning to pause before seeking reassurance, internally or externally. When you feel the urge to check, to confirm, to be seen, stop. Not forever, just long enough to notice the impulse. Ask yourself one simple question. What am I afraid will happen if I don't get approval right now? Don't rush the answer. Let it surface. This trains you to observe desire without obeying it. That alone begins to break the chain. Next, you must practice deliberate self-approval. This sounds simple, but it's uncomfortable because it removes your favorite escape route. At the end of the day, reflect quietly. Ask yourself whether you acted with integrity, restraint, and intention. If the answer is yes, that is sufficient. Reminded himself daily that his task was not to be admired but to be good. Make this your standard, not perfection, alignment. When you judge yourself by internal principles rather than external reactions, your confidence stops leaking. Another essential exercise is voluntary detachment from praise. When approval arrives, because sometimes it will, receive it calmly and let it pass. Don't cling to it, don't replay it, don't build your identity around it. Seneca compared praise to borrowed light. It illuminates briefly, but it does not belong to you. The goal is not to reject validation aggressively, but to become indifferent to it. Indifference is strength without hostility. It's quiet, it's stable. You should also train yourself to endure mild discomfort without explaining yourself. The urge to justify, clarify, or defend is often a disguised request for validation. Practice restraint. Silence, when chosen consciously, strengthens your self-trust. Epictetus taught that if you wish to improve, be content to appear foolish or misunderstood. That sentence alone dismantles the need to be constantly affirmed. Read it again when the urge to prove yourself arises. As you build these habits, something subtle but powerful happens. Your mind slows down. Decisions feel cleaner. You stop scanning faces, reactions, and imagined judgments. You move from reactivity to intention, from seeking permission to exercising choice. This is what freedom feels like internally, not loud confidence, but calm ownership of your inner world. Remember this, validation is not evil, but dependence on it is. The Stoic path is not about isolating yourself emotionally, it's about anchoring yourself internally. You still connect, still contribute, still engage, but you do so from a place of self-command. When your worth no longer requires external confirmation, your mind becomes lighter, sharper, and harder to manipulate. Take this seriously. Practice it daily. Notice the impulses. Delay the reaction. Judge yourself by your values. Let praise pass through you instead of into you. This is how mental slavery dissolves, not through force but through discipline. And once you taste that freedom, you won't want to give it back. Number 6, adversity is training, not punishment. Most people secretly believe adversity is a verdict, a signal that something has gone wrong, a quiet accusation from life saying you're flawed, unlucky, or behind. You feel it the moment resistance appears, the tightening in your chest, the urge to ask, why me? But Stoicism flips that reflex on its head. It tells you calmly, almost bluntly, that adversity isn't here to break you, it's here to train you. And the moment you stop treating difficulty like punishment, a strange thing happens inside your mind. Weakness begins to dissolve. Wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Read that again slowly. Not as a quote to admire, but as a rule to live by. The obstacle isn't an interruption of your path, it is the path. Every moment of discomfort is asking something of you. More patience, more restraint, more clarity, more courage. Life isn't testing whether you deserve ease. It's testing whether you're willing to grow into strength. Right now, notice how quickly your mind labels hardship as unfair. That label drains you. It makes you passive. It turns you into someone waiting for relief instead of someone sharpening themselves. The Stoic approach is different. You're encouraged to see pressure as weight in the gym of the mind. Not pleasant, not cruel, just necessary. Muscles don't grow from comfort. Neither does character. Seneca said, "Fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men." He didn't say suffering rewards them. He said it tests them. Tests are neutral. They only reveal what's there and what still needs work. This is where weakness quietly leaves your mind. When you stop asking for adversity to leave and start asking what it's trying to teach, you reclaim authority. You move from victimhood into authorship. You're no longer at war with reality. You're working with it. That shift alone makes you harder to shake, harder to manipulate, harder to exhaust. Here's a habit you can start today. When resistance shows up, mental, emotional, internal, pause before reacting. Literally pause, take one breath. Then ask yourself, what quality is this situation training in me right now? Discipline, detachment, endurance, self-command. Don't answer dramatically. Answer honestly. This question turns frustration into instruction. And instruction builds confidence that doesn't need validation. Epictetus reminded his students, difficulties show a person's character, not their talent, not their intelligence, their character. That means adversity isn't here to judge your worth. It's here to reveal who you are becoming. Every time you meet difficulty with composure instead of complaint, you reinforce a new identity. Someone who doesn't collapse inward at the first sign of pressure. Someone who doesn't panic. Someone who stays steady. Another exercise, stop using the word problem in your internal dialogue. Replace it with training. It sounds simple, almost silly, but language shapes perception. Perception shapes emotion. Emotion shapes behavior. When your mind hears problem, it braces for damage. When it hears training, it prepares for effort. Effort is empowering. Damage is paralyzing. You choose which lens you use. Understand this too. Stoicism never promises that adversity will feel good. That's not the goal. The goal is sovereignty over yourself, freedom from being emotionally dragged around by circumstances. Warned, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. That doesn't mean ignore pain. It means don't let your interpretation multiply it. Sit with discomfort without narrating it. No mental commentary, no dramatic storytelling, just sensation and breath. You'll notice something surprising. The moment you stop resisting discomfort mentally, it loses much of its power. That's training. That's mental callousing. Over time, what once rattled you barely registers. Adversity also exposes where you've been soft without realizing it, where you've outsourced your calm, where you've depended on certainty, approval, or control. This isn't an insult. It's intelligence gathering. Weakness that's seen can be strengthened. weakness that controls you silently. So the next time life tightens the screws, don't ask for mercy. Ask for mastery. Tell yourself, this is refining me, not in a loud, motivational way, in a grounded, unshakable way. You don't need hype. You need consistency. Show up to the training every time, even when you don't feel like it, especially then. Over time, something profound happens. You stop fearing difficulty. You stop interpreting resistance as a signal to retreat. Your mind becomes quieter, more stable, more difficult to disturb. And that's when you realize the Stoics were never trying to help you avoid pain. They were teaching you how to become someone pain can't dominate. Adversity was never punishment. It was preparation. The only question is whether you'll finally start training instead of resisting. Number 7, silence and restraint are signs of inner strength. Silence and restraint are signs of inner strength because they reveal something most people never develop: command over themselves. As wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That single sentence, if you let it sink in, can dissolve so much weakness from your mind. You don't have to react. You don't have to prove. You don't have to explain yourself into exhaustion. Yet most people do constantly. They speak too fast, justify too much, and leak their power through unnecessary words. You can feel when that's happening inside you, the tension, the urge to respond, the almost physical discomfort of holding back. And that moment is exactly where strength is built. Not later, right there. You've been conditioned to believe that silence means defeat, that restraint means suppression, that holding your tongue makes you small. Stoicism teaches the opposite. Epictetus reminded us, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. Silence isn't absence, it's presence, it's awareness. It's the space where you decide rather than react. When you pause instead of rushing to fill the air, your mind stops being dragged around by impulse. You start noticing your thoughts instead of being owned by them. That's not passive. That's dominance, quiet dominance over yourself. Pay attention to how often you feel the need to comment, defend, clarify, or assert. Each urge is a signal, not that you should speak, but that you should observe. Ask yourself, what am I trying to protect right now? Very often it's ego, and ego unchecked is where weakness hides. Stoicism doesn't ask you to erase your ego, it asks you to put it in its place. Seneca warned, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay doesn't just cool emotion, it exposes it. When you wait, you see how fragile many of your reactions actually are. You realize how many words you were about to waste on something that didn't deserve your energy. Silence sharpens you. It trains you to tolerate discomfort without flinching. That's rare. Most people can't sit with internal pressure for more than a few seconds before they relieve it by talking, scrolling, or reacting. You don't have to live that way. Start small. Practice intentional pauses. When a thought demands expression, let it wait. Count your breath. Feel the urge rise and fall. This is not suppression, this is discipline. And discipline, as the Stoics knew well, is freedom disguised as effort. Restraint works the same way. It's not about denying yourself life, it's about choosing your responses deliberately. Said, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Simple words, brutally demanding standard. Imagine how much lighter your mind becomes when you stop saying what doesn't need to be said, when you stop reacting to every stimulus, when you stop feeding every emotion with action. Restraint creates mental cleanliness. It removes clutter. It restores clarity. You can train this like a muscle. One powerful exercise is deliberate silence. Choose moments each day where you speak less than you normally would, not out of withdrawal but out of choice. Observe more, listen more. Let conversations unfold without steering them. Notice how often the urge to interrupt arises. Each time it does, you're being handed a chance to strengthen yourself. Take it. Another practice is response delay. When emotion spikes, decide in advance that you will not respond immediately. Not verbally, not mentally. Give yourself space. This space is where wisdom enters. There's also the discipline of internal restraint. Watch your inner commentary. Notice how quickly you judge, assume, or react in your own mind. Stoicism isn't only about what you say out loud, it's about the conversations you allow internally. Epictetus taught that it's not events that disturb us but our judgments about them. Silence those judgments, not permanently, just long enough to see them clearly. When you do, many lose their grip. What you'll discover is this: silence makes you heavier in a good way. Your words carry more weight because they are fewer. Your presence becomes steadier because it isn't constantly leaking outward. You stop chasing validation through expression. You stop needing to be seen reacting. And paradoxically, you become more noticeable, not because you demand attention, but because you no longer need it. This is how weakness leaves the mind. Not through force, not through noise, but through calm refusal to be ruled by impulse. Every time you choose restraint over reaction, you're voting for the version of yourself that is composed, grounded, and unshakable. Keep voting that way, day after day, breath after breath. Let silence train you. Let restraint refine you. As Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And bravery, more often than not, is quiet. Number 8, desire unchecked is the root of weakness. Desire unchecked is the root of weakness because the moment you let desire lead, you stop leading yourself. That's not moral judgment, it's mechanics. Epictetus said it plainly: freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Desire, when left unattended, quietly hands your freedom away. You start moving toward outcomes instead of principles. You react, you wait, you hope. And every time your peace depends on something outside your command, your mind softens, not because you're flawed, but because you've abandoned the helm. You've felt this before, the subtle tightening in your chest when you want something too badly. The mental noise, the inner bargaining, the loss of stillness. That's weakness forming in real time, not dramatic, not obvious, just a quiet erosion of clarity. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't say desire was evil. They said desire must be trained. Unexamined desire turns you into a servant. Examined desire turns you into a sovereign. Reminded himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Read that again, slower. Desire magnifies estimates. It convinces you that relief, validation, certainty, or satisfaction live somewhere ahead of you. Once that belief takes hold, you stop standing upright in the present moment. You lean forward mentally, and a leaning mind is an unstable mind. Stoicism doesn't ask you to kill desire. It asks you to put it in its place. You are allowed to prefer outcomes, but you are never allowed to need them. The difference matters more than most people realize. Preference keeps you steady. Need makes you brittle. When desire becomes a demand, your inner posture collapses. You start compromising standards. You start explaining yourself. You start chasing relief instead of cultivating strength. Weakness doesn't announce itself. It whispers, just this once. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop asking what you want and start asking what you are willing to be ruled by. Because whatever controls your emotions controls you. The Stoics were relentless about this. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Bravery, in this sense, isn't loud or theatrical. It's the quiet courage to feel desire without obeying it. To let an urge pass through you like weather instead of building a home inside your mind. This is where strength actually forms, not in suppression but in observation. When desire arises, don't fight it. Don't indulge it either. Watch it. Feel how it pulls. Notice how it promises relief. Notice how urgent it tries to sound. Then do nothing. That pause, small, almost invisible, is where weakness dies. Every time you insert space between impulse and action, you reclaim authority over yourself. You want something practical? Start here. Each day, deliberately practice wanting less. Not forever, just today. When the mind reaches outward, gently pull it back. Say to yourself, "I am complete without this." not as a mantra but as a calibration. Let the nervous system settle. Let the craving lose oxygen. You're not denying yourself, you're strengthening yourself. Another exercise: write down what you believe you need in order to feel calm, confident, or whole. Then question each line, not aggressively, honestly. Ask, is this essential or merely familiar? You'll be surprised how much weakness comes from inherited assumptions rather than truth. The moment you see that, something loosens inside you. Train negative visualization, but softly. Imagine not getting what you want, and then imagine yourself still standing, still breathing, still intact. This isn't pessimism, it's inoculation. The Stoics used it to reduce dependency, not joy. When you realize you can endure absence, desire stops holding you hostage. And here's the deeper layer most people miss. Unchecked desire doesn't just weaken your emotions, it fractures your identity. You start defining yourself by outcomes instead of character. You become someone who is almost confident, almost at peace, almost fulfilled once something happens. Stoicism pulls you back into the now and says, power lives here, not later. So adopt this habit. Before acting on a desire, ask, does this strengthen my command over myself or reduce it? Let that question slow you down. Let it sharpen you. Over time, your mind will feel less crowded, less desperate, more solid. That's not detachment from life. That's engagement without chains. Weakness fades when desire is disciplined, not destroyed. You don't need to want less forever. You need to want wisely. And the more you practice, the more you'll notice something subtle but profound. You no longer feel pulled. You choose, calmly, deliberately, like someone who finally remembers who's in charge. Number 9, mastery of the self outweighs control over others. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. Epictetus. There is a quiet illusion that weakens the mind without announcing itself. It whispers that strength comes from influence, that security comes from shaping outcomes, that peace arrives once others behave the way you want them to. You've felt it before, the subtle urge to manage reactions, to anticipate responses, to steer conversations, emotions, perceptions. Stoicism cuts directly through that illusion. It reminds you, calmly and without drama, that mastery of the self outweighs control over others every single time. Not morally, mechanically, psychologically, existentially. The moment you attempt to control what isn't yours, opinions, emotions, choices, you place your stability in foreign hands. And that's weakness, even if it looks like confidence on the surface. Warned against this trap repeatedly, not because people are untrustworthy, but because your peace cannot survive dependency. The Stoic mind doesn't ask, how do I get them to change? It asks, what within me still reacts? That shift alone dissolves a huge amount of inner tension. You stop fighting shadows. You stop negotiating with chaos. You return your energy to the only territory you actually govern. Here, where this truth becomes uncomfortable but freeing. Every urge to dominate externally is usually a signal of something left unattended internally. Stoicism doesn't shame that impulse. It redirects it. Seneca wrote that no man is free who is not master of himself, and he wasn't speaking poetically. He meant that self-command is the foundation of all strength. When your emotions run unchecked, you are already ruled. When your thoughts scatter, you are already occupied territory. You don't need more leverage over the world. You need fewer leaks inside your own mind. If you want to feel this truth instead of just understanding it intellectually, start here. Observe the moment you feel the need to correct, impress, convince, or overpower. Don't act on it. Don't suppress it either. Just notice it. That pause is not weakness. It's the beginning of authority. In that gap, you reclaim choice. You remind yourself that discipline is not restriction, it's alignment. Each time you choose restraint over reaction, you reinforce an internal hierarchy where reason leads and impulse follows. The Stoics were relentless about this. They didn't promise comfort, they promised clarity, and clarity strips weakness fast. When you stop outsourcing your emotional balance, you stop being pulled apart by expectations. You no longer rise and fall based on approval or resistance. You become steady, not rigid, steady. There's a difference. Rigidity is fear pretending to be control. Steadiness is self-trust made visible. You may notice resistance when you first practice this. The mind will protest. It will argue that letting go of control means losing power. That's the old conditioning talking. In reality, the opposite happens. When you no longer try to command others, your presence becomes cleaner. Your words carry less desperation. Your silence carries more weight. Epictetus made this brutally simple when he said that people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Control your views and the disturbance dissolves. Chase control outside yourself and disturbance multiplies. To turn this into a daily habit, train your attention like a muscle. At the start of each day, ask one grounded question. What is within my control today? Keep the answer narrow. Thoughts, judgments, effort, integrity. Then ask the follow-up that sharpens everything. What am I tempted to control that is? This isn't an exercise in detachment from life. It's an exercise in precision. You stop wasting force where it has no effect. Another practice, simple, uncomfortable, powerful, is voluntary restraint. Choose moments to not react when reaction feels justified. Not as suppression, but as rehearsal. You are teaching your nervous system that urgency is optional. That calm is a choice. Over time, this builds a deep internal confidence that doesn't need performance. You stop proving strength and start embodying it. Stoicism never asks you to become passive. It asks you to become sovereign. There's a difference. A sovereign mind acts deliberately, not compulsively. It engages without attachment and withdraws without resentment. When you master yourself, you are no longer at war with uncertainty. You don't need guarantees. You don't need dominance. You need alignment. And alignment is quiet but immovable. If weakness has ever felt like mental noise, overthinking, second-guessing, emotional volatility, this truth is your exit. Not tomorrow, now. The next time you feel pulled to control the uncontrollable, return inward. Tighten the one grip that matters. Refine your thoughts. Govern your reactions. Choose discipline over drama. As reminded himself again and again, the strength you seek is already yours once you stop handing it away. Adopt this not as a philosophy but as a daily stance. You will feel lighter, clearer, harder to shake. And slowly, without trying, you'll notice something unexpected. When you no longer chase control over others, you gain influence without effort, because you finally possess the one thing that makes all power real: yourself. Number 10, acceptance of impermanence removes anxiety. Acceptance of impermanence removes anxiety because anxiety feeds on the illusion that things are supposed to stay the same. You feel uneasy not because something might change, but because part of you secretly believes it shouldn't. Stoicism cuts directly through that false expectation. Reminded himself again and again that everything you see is already in the process of leaving, not as a threat, as a fact. And when you stop arguing with facts, your mind finally relaxes. You don't need to brace yourself against life anymore. You move with it. Think about how much tension you carry simply from trying to hold on. You grip outcomes. You cling to emotions. You replay moments, hopping to freeze them. And when reality refuses to cooperate, your nervous system goes on alert. Acceptance of impermanence doesn't make you passive. It makes you precise. You stop wasting energy on resistance and start directing it toward response. Epictetus was blunt about this. Don't demand that events happen as you wish. Wish that they happen as they do. That single mental shift drains anxiety at its source. Here's the part most people misunderstand. Accepting impermanence does not mean becoming cold or detached from life. It means you stop outsourcing your peace to things you can't control. When you truly accept that emotions rise and fall, that circumstances turn without warning, that even your own thoughts are temporary visitors, something remarkable happens. The mind loosens its grip. The background noise quiets. You're no longer trying to secure the future before it arrives. You're grounded where you are. Anxiety thrives on the question, what if this never stops? Stoic thinking answers calmly, it will stop. Everything does. That answer isn't pessimistic, it's stabilizing. When you stop expecting permanence from temporary things, disappointment loses its power to shake you. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Impermanence dissolves that imagination. It pulls you back from hypothetical disasters and anchors you in what actually exists right now. You don't need to force this understanding. You train it. One simple habit is reminding yourself quietly and repeatedly that whatever you're feeling is passing through, not taking residence, not fighting the feeling, not analyzing it, just labeling it as temporary. This creates psychological distance without suppression. The emotion is allowed to exist, but it no longer defines you. You observe instead of drown. Another exercise is to mentally rehearse loss, not dramatically, not emotionally, but calmly. The Stoics called this. You gently acknowledge that things you value are not guaranteed, not to scare yourself, but to remove the shock when change arrives. When the mind has already accepted impermanence, anxiety has nowhere to attach itself. It can't surprise you anymore. You also practice impermanence through restraint. When something feels good, you enjoy it fully without mentally extending it into the future. No bargaining, no silent contracts, just presence. This trains your nervous system to experience pleasure without fear of loss. That alone weakens anxiety more than positive thinking ever could. At times, your mind will resist this truth. It will argue. It will demand certainty. Let it. You don't need to win the argument. You return to the principle. Everything flows, even this resistance. Wrote that time is like a river of passing events. You're standing in it whether you like it or not. Fighting the current only exhausts you. Acceptance of impermanence builds a quiet kind of strength. You become harder to destabilize, not because you control life, but because you no longer expect it to be stable. That expectation is what anxiety feeds on. Remove it, and anxiety starves. So start today. Notice where you're clenching mentally. Release the demand that something must last. Replace it with a simple acknowledgement. This too will move on. Say it when you're tense. Say it when you're calm. Say it when you don't believe it yet. Over time, your mind will learn what the Stoics already knew. Peace isn't found in permanence. It's found in understanding change and standing steady inside it. If you've stayed with me until this moment, understand this. Strength was never something you needed to add to your life. It was something you needed to uncover. Stoicism doesn't make you cold, detached, or emotionless. It makes you unshakable. It strips away dependence, fear, and false expectations, and leaves behind clarity, composure, and quiet power. The truths you've just heard aren't meant to be admired. They're meant to be lived. Weakness fades the moment you stop arguing with reality, the moment you stop begging for control, the moment you decide to govern your own mind. As reminded us, your life is shaped not by what happens to you, but by how you respond to it. So don't rush back into noise. Sit with these ideas. Apply even one of them today when you're tested, when you're provoked, when life doesn't bend your way. That's where real transformation begins. If this video resonated with you, make sure you revisit it. Strength grows through repetition. And if you're serious about mastering your mind, stay with this channel. The journey toward mental invincibility has only just begun. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. What if I told you that the reason women don't fully respect you has nothing to do with your looks, your money, or how much effort you put in? and everything to do with how you carry yourself when no one is watching. Most men try harder, they talk more, they explain themselves, they seek approval, and without realizing it, they quietly give away the very thing that creates respect. You've probably felt this before. The more you try to impress, the less seriously you're taken. The more available you are, the less valued you feel. It's frustrating, confusing, and it makes you question what you're doing wrong. But the Stoics figured this out centuries ago. They understood a silent psychology of respect, one rooted in self-control, emotional discipline, and unshakable inner authority. No chasing, no convincing, no effort wasted. In this video, I'll share 10 Stoic secrets that make women naturally respect you, not because you demand it, but because your presence commands it. Watch this video till the very end, because the final secret ties everything together. And once you understand it, the way you move, speak, and show up will never be the same again. Number 1. Emotional self-control in every situation. Emotional self-control is not about suppression, stiffness, or pretending you don't feel anything. It's about sovereignty. It's about you remaining the author of your responses no matter what the moment throws at you. When you master this, something subtle but undeniable happens. Your presence becomes heavier, calmer, and more trustworthy. You stop leaking energy. You stop broadcasting insecurity. You move through situations with a quiet steadiness that doesn't need explanation. And that steadiness is what earns respect without effort. The Stoics never aimed to eliminate emotion. They aimed to govern it. That distinction matters. You feel anger, interest, disappointment, curiosity, but those emotions don't grab the steering wheel. They report information and you decide what to do with it. This is why Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. Emotional self-control lives in that space between stimulus and response. And once you learn to inhabit it, your entire way of relating to others changes. Most men lose respect not because they feel emotions, but because their emotions spill out unchecked. Tone shifts, energy spikes, words rush forward. There's a subtle urgency to be understood, validated, or corrected. Emotional self-control removes that urgency. You stop needing to resolve everything immediately. You stop letting momentary feelings dictate permanent impressions. You become slower to react and faster to recover. That combination is rare, and rarity is powerful. When you hold your emotional center, you communicate strength without asserting it. There's no need to raise your voice, defend your position, or prove your intent. You don't argue with reality. You don't chase clarity when ambiguity appears. You remain composed, and that composure tells the truth for you. Wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." In modern terms, that means refusing to let external behavior drag you into internal chaos. You stay yourself. You stay steady. That alone separates you. Emotional self-control also signals self-trust. When you don't overreact, you show that you believe you can handle whatever comes next. There's no panic beneath the surface. No scrambling for footing. You're rooted. That rooting creates safety. Not because you reassure, but because you're predictable in the right way. Your emotional baseline doesn't swing wildly. People instinctively respect those who are hard to destabilize. This kind of control is built, not declared. You don't announce it. You practice it quietly. You practice it when something irritates you and you choose silence over impulse. You practice it when something excites you and you choose restraint over excess. You practice it when something disappoints you and you choose dignity over display. None of this makes you cold. It makes you deliberate. And deliberateness is attractive because it implies depth. A crucial Stoic insight is that emotions are judgments, not commands. You feel what you think. When you change how you interpret events, your emotional experience shifts automatically. Seneca put it plainly, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Emotional self-control begins with questioning your interpretations. Is this moment truly urgent? Is this reaction necessary? Is this feeling asking for action or simply awareness? When you slow down enough to ask those questions, you regain authorship over yourself. One practical exercise is emotional labeling. When a feeling arises, name it internally without judgment. Not to analyze it endlessly, but to create distance. The moment you name it, you're no longer inside it, you're observing it. That shift alone reduces its intensity. From there, you choose how to move. This trains you to experience emotion without becoming emotion. Another powerful practice is controlled breathing paired with posture awareness. Emotion lives in the body before it reaches the mouth. Shoulders tighten, breathing shortens, jaw clenches. When you consciously relax your body and slow your breath, you interrupt the emotional cascade. This isn't avoidance, it's mastery. You're telling your nervous system that you're safe, grounded, and in control. You also strengthen emotional self-control by delaying expression, not suppressing but postponing. You don't need to say everything the moment you feel it. Let emotions settle before they speak through you. This delay transforms raw feeling into measured communication. Over time, people begin to sense that when you do speak, it matters. You're not reactive noise, you're signal. There's also the discipline of outcome independence. Emotional volatility often comes from attachment to how things should go. When you loosen that attachment, you loosen the grip of emotion. You act with intention, not expectation. You show up fully, but you don't cling to results. That posture creates calm, because your emotional state is no longer held hostage by outcomes you can't control. What makes this truly powerful is that emotional self-control compounds. Each moment you hold yourself with composure builds internal evidence that you are reliable to yourself. Confidence grows quietly from that evidence. Not bravado, not dominance, just a grounded certainty that you can handle pressure without collapsing or exploding. This is why respect appears without effort. You're not trying to manage perceptions. You're managing yourself. You're not seeking approval. You're maintaining alignment. And alignment is felt instantly, even if it's never verbalized. So start small, but start deliberately. Pause before reacting. Breathe before speaking. Question your interpretations. Train your body to stay relaxed under emotional load. Let feelings pass through you without commandeering you. Do this consistently, and emotional self-control becomes your default state, not a tactic, not a performance, but a way of being. When you reach that point, your presence speaks before your words ever do. Calm replaces chaos. Precision replaces impulse. And respect follows naturally, because nothing commands respect more quietly or more powerfully than a man who governs himself. Number 2. Unshakable inner calm under pressure. Unshakable inner calm under pressure isn't something you perform for the outside world. It's something you cultivate in private, and others simply feel it when you walk into a moment that would normally unsettle most people. You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You don't defend it. You just carry yourself as someone who is not internally negotiable. That kind of calm doesn't come from confidence tricks or rehearsed lines. It comes from alignment. From knowing, deep down, that no external tension has authority over your inner state unless you grant it permission. The Stoics were obsessed with this idea for a reason. They understood that pressure is inevitable but disturbance is optional. Wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Read that slowly. Pressure doesn't shake you. Your interpretation does. Inner calm is not the absence of intensity. It's the presence of clarity inside intensity. Most men believe calm arrives once life becomes easier. Stoicism flips that completely. Calm is not the reward for avoiding difficulty. Calm is the weapon you carry into difficulty. When pressure rises, most people speed up internally. Their thoughts scatter. Their emotions rush forward, desperate to resolve tension as quickly as possible. You learn to do the opposite. You slow down inside. You widen your awareness. You breathe. You choose. That pause, that microscopic gap between stimulus and response, is where respect is born. Epictetus put it bluntly, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Unshakable calm is not passivity, it is mastery. You still act, you still speak, you still decide, but your nervous system is not hijacked by urgency. You are not pushed into proving, defending, or fixing yourself in the moment. You are anchored, and anchoring is rare. When you develop this calm, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop broadcasting need through microreactions. You stop signaling insecurity through rushed explanations. You stop leaking tension through your body language. Pressure no longer pulls you out of yourself. It reveals you. And what it reveals is steadiness. That steadiness communicates emotional authority without a single word. This is why unshakable calm earns respect without effort. You are no longer trying to manage perception. You are managing your inner world. Everything else adjusts naturally. People sense when someone is internally centered because it creates contrast. Most minds are noisy, reactive, hungry for relief. A calm mind feels like open space. It doesn't chase. It doesn't cling. It doesn't collapse under uncertainty. It simply remains present. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Pressure is not your enemy. It is the training ground for your calm. Every moment of internal tension is an invitation to strengthen your composure instead of escaping it. You don't need to eliminate discomfort. You need to outgrow your reflex to be ruled by it. Unshakable calm begins with one discipline: radical ownership of your internal state. You stop blaming circumstances for how you feel. You stop waiting for external reassurance to settle your nerves. You recognize that your breath, your posture, your focus are always available tools. When pressure rises, you return to the body. Slow the breath. Drop the shoulders. Unclench the jaw. These are not trivial adjustments. They are signals to your nervous system that you are safe enough to remain composed. Another habit is mental subtraction. Under pressure, the mind loves to add stories, projections, imagined outcomes. Calm comes from removing excess interpretation. Ask yourself, what is actually happening right now without narrative? Not what it means, not where it might lead, just what is. This brings you back into the present where control exists. Reminded himself, confine yourself to the present. That single practice dissolves a surprising amount of inner chaos. You also train calm by delaying emotional expression, not suppressing it but postponing it. Pressure often tempts you to react immediately, to release tension outward. Instead, you let the emotion pass through without acting on it. You observe it like weather. This builds internal resilience. You learn, through repetition, that emotions rise and fall whether you indulge them or not. That realization alone weakens their grip on you. A powerful Stoic exercise is voluntary discomfort, not to punish yourself, but to expand your tolerance. You intentionally place yourself in situations where the ego wants relief, reassurance, or control, and you practice staying relaxed inside them. Not rigid, relaxed. Calm is not tight self-control. It is loose strength. Think of a deep-rooted tree in strong wind. It doesn't fight the wind, it absorbs it. Another exercise is negative visualization, used correctly. You briefly imagine loss, rejection, uncertainty, not to dwell in fear, but to strip these outcomes of their terror. When you face them mentally, they lose their power to ambush you emotionally. Seneca advised, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." When pressure arrives, it feels familiar, not shocking. What changes as you practice this is your relationship with intensity. You stop seeing pressure as something that threatens your identity. It becomes something that sharpens it. Your reactions slow. Your presence deepens. You become less predictable in the best way because you are no longer governed by impulse. That unpredictability, grounded in calm, commands respect effortlessly. And here's the final truth most men overlook. Inner calm is deeply attractive because it signals self-trust. You don't need to control the moment because you trust yourself to handle whatever unfolds. You don't rush to stabilize uncertainty because uncertainty doesn't destabilize you. That trust is felt. It's reassuring. It's rare. So start today quietly. Train your breath. Train your attention. Train your pause. Let pressure arrive and stay with yourself instead of escaping outward. Each time you remain calm where you once reacted, you reinforce a new identity, one that doesn't need effort to be respected, one that simply is. Number 3, absolute independence from validation. Absolute independence from validation is not something you announce. It's something people feel the moment you enter a space. It's the quiet signal that you are not here to be approved of, ranked, judged, or emotionally fed. You are here because you chose to be, and that distinction changes everything about how you're perceived. When you no longer look outward for confirmation, your energy settles, your movements slow, your words become deliberate instead of defensive. You stop performing and you start being. That shift alone creates respect without effort. Most people live on a feedback loop they barely notice. A glance, a tone change, a delay, a response, or lack of one immediately triggers interpretation. Am I liked? Did I say the right thing? Should I adjust? That internal noise is exhausting, and worse, it makes you predictable. Validation dependence trains you to chase signals instead of lead yourself. The Stoics warned against this long ago. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by their opinion." That sentence isn't poetic comfort. It's a practical instruction. The moment someone else's approval becomes unnecessary, their influence over you dissolves. Absolute independence from validation doesn't mean you reject appreciation or close yourself off. It means appreciation doesn't move your center, praise doesn't inflate you, disinterest doesn't deflate you. You remain internally level. And that emotional self-sufficiency is rare. Most people are reactive. They rise and fall based on external cues. When you don't, your presence feels grounded, almost immovable. That steadiness is what people interpret as confidence, even if they can't explain why. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Seeking validation is often invisible to the person doing it, but obvious to everyone else. It shows up in over-explaining, in softening your boundaries, in saying things you don't fully stand behind just to maintain harmony, in adjusting your identity depending on who's watching. Independence from validation cuts all of that out. You speak when you have something to say. You stop talking when you don't. You don't rush to fill silence or justify yourself. Silence becomes neutral, not threatening, and neutrality, when it's calm, carries authority. Wrote, "I do my duty. Other things do not trouble me." That's validation independence in its form. You focus on what's yours to manage, your actions, your standards, your conduct, and you let everything else exist without interference. This mindset removes the subtle desperation that weakens most interactions. You're not trying to secure a reaction. You're not waiting for permission to be yourself. You're already decided. What makes this powerful is that validation independence creates asymmetry. Not superiority, but asymmetry. When you don't need external confirmation, the emotional weight shifts. You're not leaning forward energetically. You're not seeking. You're allowing. And allowance is often mistaken for strength because it signals abundance. Abundance of self-trust, of options, of internal approval. You don't need to prove your value because you're not questioning it. This is also why validation independence feels uncomfortable at first. You've been conditioned to measure yourself through response. Detaching from that can feel like standing without mirrors. But this discomfort is where growth happens. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Validation dependence is a form of emotional slavery. Independence is the slow reclaiming of authority over your inner state. To build this independence, you must first notice how often you seek permission emotionally, not verbally but internally. Pay attention to the micro moments where you wait for a reaction to decide how you feel. The instant you notice this, pause. Don't correct it aggressively. Just observe. Awareness weakens the habit. Over time, that pause becomes space, and space gives you choice. One powerful exercise is intentional self-approval. At the end of each day, ask yourself one simple question. Did I act in alignment with my values today? Not did I get praise, not did things go my way. Alignment only. If the answer is yes, let that be enough. This trains your nervous system to associate worth with integrity rather than response. Over time, your body stops craving external validation because it's being internally supplied. Another practice is controlled restraint. Choose moments where you could seek reassurance and consciously don't, not out of pride but as training. Let uncertainty exist without resolving it immediately. Let silence breathe. Let people interpret you however they choose. This builds emotional muscle. You learn that nothing collapses when you don't chase clarity or approval. In fact, things often stabilize on their own. There's also a deeper Stoic layer to this, accepting that you will not be understood by everyone and releasing the need to be. Reminded himself, "I was born to work with others." Notice he didn't say to be liked by others. Cooperation doesn't require validation. Respect doesn't require explanation. When you internalize this, you stop trying to manage perceptions. You let your character speak over time. Validation independence sharpens your boundaries naturally. You don't need to announce them or defend them emotionally. You simply don't cross lines you don't respect. And when boundaries are calm instead of reactive, they're taken seriously. You don't negotiate your standards every time someone pushes. You don't bend just to keep connection alive. You trust that what aligns will remain, and what doesn't can leave without damage to your identity. The paradox is this: the less you seek validation, the more freely it's offered. Not because you engineered it, but because you're no longer draining interactions with need. You're present, you're stable, you're internally sourced. That combination feels safe and solid. People sense that you're not asking them to hold you up emotionally, and that alone generates respect. Absolute independence from validation is not a destination you arrive at once. It's a daily discipline. 1,000 small choices to stand inward instead of outward, to approve of yourself before anyone else has the chance, to anchor your worth in conduct, not applause. As Epictetus said, "Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves." Take that seriously. Practice it. Live it. And you'll notice something subtle but profound. The world responds differently when it realizes you don't need its permission to stand tall. Number 4, clear boundaries without explanation. Clear boundaries without explanation are one of the most quietly powerful signals you can project, and most people never learn how to embody them. They either over-explain, apologize, justify, or soften their edges until the boundary collapses. Stoicism teaches the opposite, not through aggression, not through control, but through clarity. When you set a boundary and don't explain it, you're not being rude, you're being rooted. You're saying, "This is where I stand," without asking anyone to agree, approve, or understand. That posture alone changes how you're perceived. You've been conditioned to believe that boundaries must come with reasons, that if you don't explain yourself, you're being unfair or cold. But explanations often come from insecurity, not kindness. They are an attempt to manage how you're perceived. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can ever compel you to do anything against your will." Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say convince. He doesn't say persuade. he says compel. Clear boundaries remove compulsion entirely. They end negotiations before they begin. When you explain your boundaries, you invite debate. You turn a decision into a discussion. And the moment it becomes a discussion, you've subtly signaled that your internal authority is negotiable. High-value men don't do this because they don't need to. Their boundaries are not emotional reactions. They are pre-decided standards. Calm, firm, unmoving. That steadiness is felt instantly. Here's the deeper truth most people miss. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They're about controlling yourself. Wrote, you can commit injustice by doing nothing. When you tolerate what violates your values, when you stay silent to avoid discomfort, when you explain yourself into exhaustion, you're slowly eroding your self-respect. Clear boundaries without explanation reverse that erosion. They restore internal alignment. And alignment is what people respond to, even if they can't articulate why. You don't need to announce your boundaries dramatically. You don't need speeches or ultimatums. You simply stop participating in what doesn't align with you. You disengage without resentment. You redirect without guilt. You choose silence over over-clarification. This is not passive, it's disciplined. Seneca warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." The same applies to men who are endlessly accommodating. When you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. Boundaries give your presence shape. There is a particular calm that comes from knowing you don't owe explanations for your standards. That calm changes your energy. Your words become fewer but heavier. Your decisions become cleaner. You stop scanning for approval after you say no. You stop rehearsing justifications in your head. You let your actions speak and your silence reinforce them. This is not detachment from people. It's attachment to principle. What creates respect is not the boundary itself, but how little emotional noise surrounds it. No anger, no pleading, no defensiveness, just quiet certainty. That certainty communicates self-trust, and self-trust is contagious. People sense when you are not trying to convince them of your worth. They sense when your no is final, not because you're rigid, but because you're clear. Stoicism emphasizes the idea of living according to nature, your nature, not the expectations imposed on you. Reminded himself, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Clear boundaries without explanation are an expression of that philosophy. You don't argue, you don't persuade. You simply act in accordance with who you've decided to be. This does require courage. There will be moments when silence feels uncomfortable, moments when you want to soften the edge to make sure you're liked, to reassure others that you're still good. But the Stoics would tell you that virtue does not require applause. If your boundary is aligned with your values, that's enough. External reactions are not your responsibility. A powerful exercise to build this habit is boundary pre-commitment. Sit quietly and define for yourself what you tolerate and what you don't. Not in dramatic terms, in calm, precise language. Write it down, internalize it. Once a boundary is pre-decided, you no longer need to improvise explanations in the moment. You simply act. This removes emotional hesitation and replaces it with grounded response. Another exercise is explanation fasting. Choose periods where you intentionally stop explaining your decisions unless absolutely necessary. Not to be dismissive, but to observe your own discomfort. Notice how often the urge to explain comes from fear of being misunderstood or disliked. Each time you resist that urge, you strengthen your internal authority. You learn that clarity does not require commentary. You can also train this through language economy. Shorten your responses. Remove emotional padding, not coldly but cleanly. Let your tone stay calm. Let your posture stay relaxed. Practice reminding himself, be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved. Your boundary is the rock. Explanations are the waves. The paradox is that the less you explain, the more seriously you're taken. not because others are intimidated, but because they sense you are not seeking permission. You are not asking to be respected. You are behaving in a way that makes respect inevitable. This is what without effort truly means. The effort was internal. The outward result looks effortless. Clear boundaries without explanation do not push people away. They filter. They remove confusion. They create a clean emotional environment where respect can exist naturally. You're not trying to manage reactions. You're managing alignment. And alignment is attractive because it's rare. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised freedom. Freedom from emotional dependence. Freedom from external validation. Freedom from living. When you stop explaining your boundaries, you step into that freedom. You move through interactions lighter, steadier, more grounded. You don't chase understanding. You embody clarity. So take this seriously, not as a tactic but as a discipline. Decide who you are, decide what you allow. Then let your actions, your silence, and your calm do the rest. You don't need to convince anyone. Stand where you stand. Hold the line without tension. And watch how respect begins to form around you, not because you demanded it, but because you no longer negotiated with yourself. Number 5. Silence instead of reactive speech. Silence, when chosen deliberately, is one of the most powerful forms of self-command you can practice. Not the awkward kind, not the resentful kind, but the grounded, intentional silence that comes from not being internally provoked. Most people speak because they feel pushed to speak. You speak because you choose to. That difference is felt immediately. It signals that your emotions don't drag you around by the collar. It tells the world that you are not ruled by impulse, urgency, or the need to explain yourself. And that calm restraint is quietly commanding. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That wasn't advice about politeness. It was instruction in power. Reactive speech gives away control. It reveals where you're sensitive. Silence, on the other hand, keeps your center intact. When you don't rush to respond, you're saying, "I decide what deserves my energy." That alone shifts how you're perceived. Most men are conditioned to believe that fast responses equal confidence. They think clarity requires immediacy. But reaction is not confidence. Reaction is exposure. When words spill out before thought settles, you hand over your emotional position. Silence pauses that transaction. It buys you space. And space is where strength lives. You don't need to fill every gap with sound. You don't need to correct, defend, or justify in real time. You can let moments breathe. You can let meaning rise instead of forcing it. Rote be like the cliff against which the waves continually break. It stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Reactive speech is the wave. Silence is the cliff. One crashes and disperses. The other remains unmoved. When you internalize this, you stop feeling threatened by tension or uncertainty. You no longer treat every moment as a test you must pass verbally. You allow yourself to be still, knowing that stillness often communicates more than words ever could. There's a subtle respect that emerges when you don't chase the last word, when you don't rush to clarify how you're perceived, when you don't jump in to soothe discomfort that isn't yours to manage. Silence in those moments doesn't create distance, it creates gravity. It makes people lean in mentally. It forces them to fill the gap with their own interpretation, and that interpretation is often more favorable than anything you could have said. This doesn't mean withdrawing emotionally or becoming cold. Stoic silence is not avoidance, it's discernment. You speak when your words add value, not when your emotions demand release. You pause not because you're unsure, but because you're sure enough to wait. That restraint reads as maturity. It tells others that you trust yourself to handle ambiguity without scrambling. Seneca warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Reactive speech is often a loss of mastery. It's the reflex to discharge emotion outward instead of containing it inward. Silence reverses that flow. It keeps the emotional circuit closed. You feel what you feel, but you don't leak it. You hold it, observe it, and decide what deserves expression. That decision-making process is where respect is born. To adopt this habit, you must first let go of the fear that silence will be misread. It often will be, and that's okay. You don't need to manage every interpretation. You don't need to be instantly understood. Calm men are not in a hurry to be decoded. They let time do the work. They trust that consistency will speak louder than clarification. A practical exercise is the deliberate pause. Anytime you feel the urge to respond quickly, insert a silent count of 3. Not to appear strategic, but to reconnect with yourself. Ask internally, am I about to speak from clarity or from reflex? If it's reflex, wait. Let the urge pass. You'll notice something important. Most impulses dissolve when they're not immediately obeyed. Another practice is emotional containment. When you feel triggered, don't suppress it and don't express it. Just hold it. Feel it fully without narration. This trains you to experience intensity without needing to perform it. Over time, your nervous system learns that it doesn't need to broadcast emotion to survive it. This inner steadiness is sensed long before it's understood. You can also train silence by reducing unnecessary explanation. Notice how often you add extra words to justify simple statements. Start removing those additions. Say less, but say it cleanly. Precision carries authority. Over-explanation carries insecurity. The fewer words you need, the more weight each one holds. Silence also sharpens your awareness. When you're not busy preparing your response, you notice tone shifts, packing, energy changes. You become present instead of performative. That presence changes how interactions unfold. You're no longer reacting to what's said, you're responding to what's happening beneath the words. This is where Stoic silence becomes transformative. You're no longer trying to steer perception through speech. You're allowing your composure to do the work. You become someone whose reactions are not predictable, not because you're erratic, but because you're not automatic. And people instinctively respect what they can't push around emotionally. The goal isn't to be quiet all the time. The goal is to be sovereign over your voice, to speak from intention, not impulse, to let silence be a choice, not a gap you rush to close. When you do this consistently, your words gain density. Your presence gains calm authority, and you stop needing to assert strength because your restraint already shows it. Begin today. Practice one pause, one reaction, one moment where you let silence stand without filling it. Over time, that silence becomes not empty but full of self-control, full of confidence, full of quiet strength. And that kind of strength never needs to announce itself. Number 6, purpose placed above pleasure. Purpose placed above pleasure is one of those ideas that sounds simple until you actually try to live it. Then you realize how radical it is. Almost everything around you is quietly urging the opposite: comfort first, ease first, gratification now. The Stoics saw this centuries ago and warned that a life arranged around pleasure becomes fragile, reactive, and easily controlled. A life arranged around purpose becomes solid, quiet, hard to shake, and that solidity is felt long before it is explained. When you place purpose above pleasure, you stop negotiating with every impulse. You're no longer asking what feels good right now. You're asking what aligns with who I've decided to become. That shift alone changes how you move through the world. You begin to act with direction instead of drift. You make choices that are anchored, not convenient, and people can sense that immediately. Not because you announce it, but because your energy is no longer scattered. Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? That question is a blade. It cuts away excess. It trims indulgence. It exposes how often pleasure disguises itself as reward when it's really avoidance. Purpose doesn't mean denying enjoyment or becoming rigid. It means enjoyment is no longer the steering wheel. You are. And when you're steering, you don't rush. You don't swerve. You don't abandon direction for momentary comfort. Respect grows in environments where discipline exists. Not loud discipline, not performative discipline, quiet discipline, the kind that doesn't need applause. When you consistently choose purpose, you signal that your life has a center. You're not pulled in 10 directions by mood, craving, or distraction. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. That self-containment creates a sense of gravity. People trust what has gravity. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." That's purpose in its form. Decide first. Then endure whatever friction follows. Pleasure avoids friction. Purpose accepts it. Purpose understands that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It's often a sign of alignment. When you stop treating discomfort as an enemy, you gain an inner steadiness that doesn't depend on circumstances cooperating. What most people never realize is that pleasure-seeking creates subtle dependency. You start organizing your actions around what gives you relief, validation, or stimulation. Over time, that makes you predictable. And predictability born from craving is weakness. Purpose-driven action does the opposite. It makes you reliable but not needy, focused but not rigid. You don't chase highs and you don't collapse when things feel flat. You continue. Seneca warned, "It is not the man who has too little but the man who craves more that is poor." Craving is the engine of pleasure-first living. Purpose interrupts that engine. It tells you that enough exists in direction, not indulgence. You begin to feel rich in momentum rather than sensation. That kind of richness doesn't fluctuate wildly. It's steady, and steadiness is deeply reassuring to be around. Living this way doesn't require grand gestures. It requires consistent restraint. Small, repeated acts of choosing what matters over what tempts. Every time you resist the urge to escape into comfort, you reinforce your self-respect. Every time you follow through when it would be easier not to, you deepen trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of all external respect. Without it, confidence is noise. One powerful practice is intention setting at the start of your day. Not a to-do list, a priority of identity. Ask yourself, what quality am I practicing today? Discipline, patience, courage, presence. Then let pleasure be secondary, not banned, just secondary. When enjoyment arrives, you receive it without clinging. When it doesn't, you don't feel deprived. You continue moving forward. Another exercise is voluntary discomfort. The Stoics deliberately practiced mild hardship to loosen pleasure's grip, not as punishment but as training. You can do the same. Choose moments where you intentionally do what is slightly uncomfortable but meaningful. Sit with boredom instead of escaping it. Delay gratification instead of rushing toward it. Notice how little actually breaks when you don't indulge every impulse. That realization is liberating. You can also reflect each evening, as did, asking yourself where you acted in alignment and where you surrendered to ease. No judgment, just awareness. Awareness sharpens choice. Over time, you begin to feel the difference between actions that drain you and actions that strengthen you. Pleasure often leaves you softer afterward. Purpose leaves you clearer. Purpose above pleasure also changes how you relate to time. Pleasure lives in immediacy. Purpose stretches across days, months, years. When your decisions are future-facing, you stop demanding that every moment entertain you. Silence becomes tolerable. Stillness becomes useful. You're not restless for stimulation because you're oriented towards something larger than the moment. This orientation communicates maturity without a word. You don't rush to fill gaps. You don't overextend for approval. You don't abandon your direction for short-term reward. Your life has structure, and structure creates safety. Seneca put it simply, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Purpose is self-mastery in motion. Choosing purpose doesn't make life dull, it makes it meaningful. Pleasure enjoyed after effort tastes cleaner. Rest earned through discipline feels deeper. But even when pleasure is absent, your sense of worth remains intact. That is the core signal. You are not animated by craving. You are animated by intention. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. Stop asking what feels good today and start asking what strengthens you tomorrow. Repeat that question until it becomes instinct. Align your actions with it. Let pleasure follow, not lead. And as you build a life guided by purpose, you'll notice something quietly powerful happening. Your presence will begin to carry weight, your words will land without force, and respect will arise naturally, without effort, because you have chosen direction over distraction. Number 7. Consistency between words and actions. Consistency between your words and your actions is quieter than charisma, subtler than confidence, and far more powerful than either. It's the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, yet it's always noticed. You feel it before you can explain it. And once you understand how deeply this principle works, you stop trying to convince anyone of who you are. You simply live it. That alignment does the speaking for you. Most people talk more than they live. Promises come easily. Intentions sound impressive. Plans feel noble in the mouth, but inconsistency leaks energy, it creates friction. Even when someone can't articulate what feels off, they sense it. When your words drift away from your behavior, trust erodes quietly, not dramatically, not all at once. It just thins out. Stoicism saw this long ago. Epictetus warned, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." That sentence alone could dismantle half of the noise men make trying to be respected. When your words and actions match, you become predictable in the best possible way. Not boring, reliable. Not rigid, rooted. There's a deep calm that forms when you don't have to remember who you claim to be because your behavior keeps track for you. You're no longer performing identity. You're expressing it. And that expression creates a sense of safety and gravity around you. People trust what doesn't fluctuate wildly. You don't need to say you're disciplined if your actions already reflect restraint. You don't need to declare your standards if your behavior enforces them quietly. You don't need to promise change if your habits already show direction. Wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Consistency is exactly that, removing the gap between declaration and execution. When there's no gap, there's no confusion. And where there's no confusion, respect grows naturally. What weakens men is not failure but contradiction. Saying one thing and doing another fractures your internal authority. Each time you break alignment, even in small ways, you train yourself to distrust your own word. That internal distrust always shows up externally. You hesitate. You over-explain. You compensate with intensity or charm. Consistency removes the need for all of that. When you trust yourself, you move with fewer words and firmer steps. This is why Stoicism places so much emphasis on integrity of character rather than outcomes. Seneca said, "He is most powerful who has himself in his own power." Having yourself in your own power means your word is not decorative, it's directional. When you say something, it carries weight, not because it's dramatic, but because it's dependable. Over time, people stop testing you. They stop pushing boundaries. They stop looking for cracks. Not because you demanded respect, but because your alignment made disrespect feel pointless. Consistency also removes emotional volatility. When your actions follow your values instead of your moods, you become steady. You don't say things you'll later retract. You don't commit out of impulse and withdraw out of discomfort. You move deliberately. That deliberateness communicates maturity. It signals that you're not governed by fleeting emotion, but by principle. And principle is rare. Rare things are respected. Many men try to shortcut this by sounding decisive without being disciplined. They speak firmly, but live loosely. That mismatch is always detected. Strength isn't in the firmness of your tone. It's in the follow-through of your behavior. You don't need to assert dominance when your consistency already establishes authority. You don't need to insist on trust when your actions quietly earn it. The Stoics believed that character is built in private long before it's recognized in public. Reminded himself daily, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That rule alone can reshape how you move through the world. Before you speak, you measure truth. Before you act, you measure alignment. Over time, that filter becomes automatic. You speak less but with more impact. You act more but with less noise. To train this, start with ruthless self-honesty, not judgment, clarity. Pay attention to the small promises you make to yourself, the quiet intentions, the internal commitments no one else hears. Each time you follow through, you strengthen your self-respect. Each time you don't, you weaken it. Consistency isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in repeated alignment at the smallest levels. A powerful exercise is word reduction. For 1 week, deliberately say less about what you plan to do, improve, or become. Replace explanation with execution. Let action take the place of narrative. Notice how your energy shifts when you stop broadcasting intention and start embodying it. There's a groundedness that emerges when your life speaks for you. Another practice is delayed speech. When you feel the urge to promise, declare, or impress, pause. Ask yourself, am I prepared to live this sentence? If the answer is uncertain, stay silent. Silence, when chosen consciously, protects your integrity. Over time, you'll notice that when you do speak, people listen differently. Not because you're louder, but because your words arrive with a track record. You can also train consistency by anchoring to values instead of outcomes. Choose a few principles that matter deeply to you: discipline, honesty, restraint, self-respect, and let your actions orbit them daily. Not occasionally, daily. Stoicism teaches that virtue is not situational, it's stable. When your behavior reflects stable values, your presence becomes solid. You no longer sway with approval or resistance. Consistency between words and actions creates a quiet authority that cannot be faked or rushed. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes the humility to let go of image and commit to substance. But once established, it works effortlessly. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to convince. You don't need to chase respect. It follows alignment naturally. This is the invitation Stoicism offers you. Become someone whose word is simply an extension of his behavior. Someone who doesn't need to signal strength because his life already reflects it. Start small. Stay steady. Tighten the gap between what you say and what you do until there is no gap left. When that happens, respect stops being something you seek and becomes something you carry. Number 8. Comfort with walking away. Comfort with walking away is one of those quiet strengths that doesn't announce itself, yet it changes the entire emotional atmosphere around you. You feel it first, long before anyone else does. It begins the moment you stop gripping outcomes so tightly. The moment you realize that staying is a choice, not a necessity. And when staying is a choice, leaving becomes power, not as a threat, not as a tactic, but as a calm, settled truth inside you. Most people fear walking away because they confuse it with loss. Loss of connection, loss of validation, loss of possibility. But the Stoics never saw it that way. To them, clinging was the real loss. Epictetus put it plainly: if you want to be invincible, make yourself independent of things you cannot control. Walking away is not rejection of others. It's refusal to abandon yourself. And that refusal creates a kind of gravity. You stop leaning forward emotionally. You stop bargaining with your own standards. You stand where you are, and you let the world meet you there, or not. When you are comfortable with walking away, your energy changes. You are no longer negotiating your worth in silence. You are no longer tolerating what drains you just to keep something alive. You become selective without becoming rigid, calm without becoming distant. This balance is rare, and rarity commands respect. Not because you demand it, but because your presence signals that you value your time, your attention, and your inner order more than fleeting approval. Reminded himself, never let the future disturb you. You will meet it if you have to with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. Comfort with walking away is rooted in that same confidence. You trust yourself to handle what comes next. You don't need guarantees. You don't need reassurance that staying is the right move. You know that whatever unfolds, you will remain intact. That self-trust is felt immediately, even if it's never spoken. What makes this so powerful is that it removes desperation from the equation. Desperation is not always loud. Often, it's subtle. It shows up as overinvestment, over-explaining, overstaying. It shows up when you ignore the quiet signals inside you telling you something is off. Walking away comfortably, calmly, cuts that pattern at the root. You stop trying to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. This is not about being cold, it's about being clean internally. When you are willing to leave situations that erode your self-respect, you stop accumulating emotional residue. You don't carry resentment, you don't rehearse conversations in your head. You don't shrink yourself to maintain proximity. You simply step back into alignment. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Walking away is an act of mastery. It says, I decide where my energy goes. There's a deep psychological shift that happens here. When you know you can walk away, you stop trying to control. You listen more. You speak less but with more precision. You don't rush to secure certainty. You allow ambiguity without anxiety. And paradoxically, this makes your presence feel safer, not riskier. Because you're not trying to trap anything. You're not trying to extract reassurance. You are there by choice, and that choice can be withdrawn without drama. To build this comfort, you must first loosen your attachment to outcomes, not by pretending you don't care, but by accepting impermanence. The Stoics were relentless about this truth. Everything changes, everything passes, said, loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. When you internalize that, walking away no longer feels like failure. It feels like cooperation with reality. A simple daily practice is to rehearse non-attachment mentally. Before entering any interaction, remind yourself quietly, I am here because I want to be, not because I need to be. Say it slowly. Feel it. This isn't an affirmation for confidence. It's a grounding statement for clarity. It helps you notice the moment you start compromising yourself for comfort. And when you notice it, you can choose differently. Another exercise is boundary rehearsal. Sit with yourself and define in writing or thought what you will not trade away for connection. Not rules for others, standards for yourself. When those standards are crossed internally, walking away becomes simpler. Not easier emotionally, but cleaner. You don't debate. You don't justify. You act in alignment. Over time, this builds an unshakable calm because your actions and values stop contradicting each other. You can also train comfort with walking away through voluntary restraint. Choose moments where you could push, pursue, or insist, and don't. Let the urge pass. Notice that nothing collapses. The world doesn't end. Your worth doesn't diminish. This teaches your nervous system that absence of control is survivable, even healthy. Each time you resist chasing, you strengthen your ability to choose yourself without fear. There is a quiet dignity in this posture. You don't announce your boundaries, you embody them. You don't threaten to leave. You simply know that you can, and that knowing settles into your body. Your shoulders drop, your breathing slows, your voice steadies. This is not performative strength, it's lived composure. Seneca warned, a man who is a slave to his passions is the most abject of slaves. Fear of walking away is often fear of being alone with yourself. But once you face that fear, it loses its grip. You realize that solitude is not emptiness, it's stability. And from that stability, connection becomes a choice, not a lifeline. Respect grows in the presence of someone who doesn't cling, not because they are distant, but because they are whole. Comfort with walking away signals that you are not trying to extract meaning from someone else. You already have it. You are simply sharing space, not filling a void. So train this, slowly, deliberately, without theatrics. Each day ask yourself where you are staying out of fear rather than choice. Each day practice letting go of outcomes, of control, of the need to be needed, and notice what replaces that tension. Calm, clarity, self-respect. When you are truly comfortable with walking away, you paradoxically stay more present when you choose to stay. You're not guarding yourself. You're not calculating exits. You are there fully because you want to be. And that presence, free of fear, free of grasping, is what earns respect without effort. Number 9, respect for yourself before anyone else. Respect for yourself before anyone else is not a slogan, it's a stance. It's the quiet line you draw inside yourself that says, "This is who I am and I won't bargain with that." Everything else grows from there. Without that inner line, respect from the outside is unstable. It comes and goes. It's conditional. But when self-respect is established first, respect from others arrives almost as a side effect, not something you chase or negotiate for. The Stoics were relentless about this. Epictetus said, "If you want to be respected by others, the great thing is to respect yourself." That line isn't poetic encouragement, it's instruction. Self-respect isn't about thinking highly of yourself. It's about refusing to abandon yourself. It's about aligning your actions with your values even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unnoticed. Especially then. Most men are taught to look outward first. Am I liked? Am I approved of? Am I accepted? That outward orientation slowly erodes self-respect because it trains you to adjust your standards based on reactions. You soften your boundaries. You explain yourself too much. You tolerate what quietly drains you. Over time, you may not even notice it happening, but your internal posture shifts from "I choose" to "I hope." And hope, when it's tied to validation, is fragile. Self-respect flips the direction. You become inwardly anchored. You don't ask, "How will this be received?" Before you ask, "Is this aligned with who I am?" That order matters more than almost anything else. When your internal compass leads, your behavior becomes clean, not perfect, clean, fewer contradictions, less self-betrayal, less resentment. You stop doing things you later have to justify to yourself. Reminded himself, never value the admiration of someone who cannot admire themselves. But there's an unspoken mirror in that quote. Never seek admiration by doing what makes you lose admiration for yourself. The moment you notice that quiet inner wince, when you know you acted against your own standard, that's self-respect asking for your attention. Ignore it too often and you stop trusting yourself. Honor it, and you build a kind of internal authority that others can feel. Here's the part that changes how you move. Self-respect simplifies your decisions. When you know what you will and won't tolerate, you stop negotiating with every situation. You don't need elaborate rules. You don't need rehearsed lines. You just know. That knowing shows up as calm certainty. You're less reactive, less defensive, less eager to explain. And that calm isn't performative, it's structural. It comes from internal consistency. This is why self-respect creates effortlessness. When you respect yourself, you don't chase outcomes that require you to shrink, bend, or posture. You don't overextend to prove value. You don't rush to secure approval. You allow things to unfold while remaining rooted in your standards. That rootedness is rare, and rarity is noticed. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Self-respect requires bravery because it often means choosing internal peace over external reassurance. It means being willing to disappoint, to be misunderstood, to be unspectacular in moments where ego wants applause. But that bravery creates freedom. You're no longer trapped in the loop of managing impressions. You're free to be present, direct, and unforced. Self-respect also sharpens your boundaries without turning you rigid. Boundaries born from fear are loud. Boundaries born from self-respect are quiet. You don't need to announce them constantly. You enforce them through consistency, through what you engage with and what you calmly let pass, through where you invest energy and where you don't. Over time, this consistency trains others how to treat you without you ever needing to demand it. Now let's make this practical, because self-respect is built through action, not reflection alone. Start with a daily alignment check. At the end of the day, ask yourself one question only. Did I act in a way that I respect today? Not did things go well, not was I liked, just that. If the answer is no, don't spiral. Note it. Adjust tomorrow. Self-respect grows through honest self-assessment without self-punishment. Next, practice delayed response. When you feel the impulse to immediately explain, justify, or seek reassurance, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself whether speaking is an expression of truth or a request for validation. If it's the second, let silence do the work. Silence chosen from self-respect is not awkward. It's grounded. It teaches you that you don't disappear when you don't perform. Another exercise is value-based decision rehearsal. Before situations that usually pull you off-center, remind yourself of one non-negotiable value. Not 10. 1. Carry it into the moment. Let it guide your tone, your pace, your choices. This trains you to act from principle rather than pressure. Also, pay attention to energy leaks. Self-respect often increases not by adding behaviors, but by removing tolerations. Notice where you feel subtly drained, diminished, or internally resistant. That resistance is information. It's not asking you to react dramatically. It's asking you to choose differently next time. Respecting yourself means listening to that signal. As this becomes habitual, something important shifts. You stop trying to be impressive. You stop trying to be harmless. You simply aim to be aligned. And alignment is felt. It communicates steadiness, maturity, and self-trust without words. This is the Stoic secret most people overlook. Respect from others mirrors the respect you demonstrate toward yourself, not the respect you ask for. When you live as someone who won't abandon his values for comfort, attention, or approval, you don't need to demand respect. You embody it. So bring it back to this again and again. Respect yourself first, in small decisions, in quiet moments, in choices no one applauds. That's where the real work is. That's where the calm authority forms. And once it's there, everything else, how you're perceived, how you're treated, begins to reorganize around it effortlessly. Number 10, mastery over impulses, not people. Mastery over impulses, not people, is one of those truths that sounds simple until you actually try to live it. Most men are taught subtly or loudly that strength is about control. Control the situation, control the outcome, control how others feel, respond, or stay. But Stoicism flips that entire idea on its head. Real strength, the kind that earns respect without effort, doesn't reach outward. It turns inward. It asks one quiet but demanding question: can you govern yourself? When you begin to master your impulses, something fundamental changes in how you move through the world. You stop being dragged around by urges, reactions, and emotional spikes. You no longer need to dominate a room, persuade anyone, or force a connection. You become solid, and solidity is unmistakable. Epictetus said it plainly: no man is free who is not master of himself. That sentence alone can become a lifelong practice. Freedom doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from not being enslaved by wanting. Impulse is the enemy of presence. The urge to speak too quickly, to explain yourself when no explanation is needed, to chase reassurance, to react emotionally instead of responding deliberately. These impulses leak information about your inner state. They signal urgency, hunger, and restlessness. Not because you're weak, but because you haven't yet learned to pause. Mastery begins in that pause. A single breath where you choose restraint instead of release. Over time, that restraint becomes composure. And composure is rare. Stoicism never asks you to suppress your feelings. It asks you to observe them without obedience. Wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." That line is about impulse control at its core. The feeling arises, but you decide whether it gets a vote. Most people feel and immediately act. You feel and then choose. That gap, small but intentional, is where respect is born. Here, what many men misunderstand: trying to control people is always a sign of inner chaos. The more someone needs to manage reactions, outcomes, or perceptions, the more unstable they are inside. Mastery over impulses removes that need entirely. When you're calm within yourself, you don't need to steer others. You don't need to impress. You don't need to win. You're already steady, and that steadiness makes manipulation unnecessary. Seneca warned, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." Power over yourself means you don't chase stimulation to escape boredom. You don't chase approval to escape doubt. You don't chase intensity to escape stillness. You can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to change it. That ability is felt instantly, even if no one can articulate why. It shows up in your tone, your packing, your silence, your refusal to be rushed emotionally. Impulse mastery also reshapes desire. You still want things. You still feel attraction, curiosity, interest. But those feelings don't hijack your behavior. You don't abandon your values for momentum. You don't overextend to secure closeness. You don't sacrifice self-respect for a momentary high. You stay aligned. And alignment is what creates quiet authority. People trust what is aligned because it doesn't contradict itself. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to delay reaction, not as a tactic, but as a discipline. When an impulse rises, whether to speak, to act, to withdraw, to push, train yourself to wait. Count breaths. Feel the urge fully without moving. This is not suppression. This is strength training for the mind. Each time you do this, you're teaching yourself that you are larger than the impulse, that you don't have to obey every internal command. There is a stoic calm that comes from knowing you can handle yourself under pressure. Reminded himself, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. That idea applies inwardly too. The best response to impulsive emotion is not to mirror it, but to rise above it. When you stop being reactive, you stop being predictable. And unpredictability rooted in calm, not chaos, commands respect. Another practice is intentional restraint. Choose daily to not indulge a harmless impulse, not because it's bad, but because you're training sovereignty. Skip the immediate gratification. Sit with the urge. Let it pass. You'll notice something surprising. Urges crest and fall like waves. They feel permanent until you watch them closely. The moment you see that, their grip weakens. You realize you're not your impulses. You're the one observing them. Stoicism teaches that dignity comes from choice. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." Mastery over impulses is embodiment. You don't announce discipline. You demonstrate it through consistency, through the absence of desperation, through the presence of calm. People don't respect words nearly as much as they respect self-control they can feel. As you deepen this mastery, your energy changes. You become less volatile and more grounded, less eager and more intentional, less reactive and more deliberate. You're not trying to control dynamics anymore because you're not trying to escape discomfort. You can tolerate ambiguity. You can tolerate silence. You can tolerate not knowing where something is going. That tolerance reads as confidence because it is confidence. Confidence in your ability to remain whole regardless of outcome. This is why Stoic men don't chase influence. Influence follows them, not because they demand it, but because they don't need it. They are not ruled by impulses, and so they don't try to rule others. They lead by example, quietly. They show that self-mastery is the highest form of power available to a human being. Your work then is simple but demanding. Watch yourself. Catch the impulse before it escapes your body. Pause, breathe, choose, practice daily, not perfectly but consistently. Over time, this discipline becomes your baseline. You move slower but with more certainty. You speak less but with more weight. And without effort, without strategy, without force, respect begins to meet you where you stand. If you've stayed with me till now, understand this. Respect isn't something you chase, explain, or negotiate. It's something that naturally follows when you are anchored in yourself. Stoicism never promised approval. It promised freedom. And the moment you stop needing validation, the dynamic shifts, quietly, powerfully, permanently. These principles aren't tricks. They're not tactics. They're standards. When you embody them, you don't announce your value, you live it. Your calm becomes noticeable. Your restraint becomes attractive. Your silence begins to speak louder than words ever could. But here's the real question. Will you just consume this wisdom, or will you apply it? Because knowing these secrets changes nothing. Becoming them changes everything. So take one principle from this video, just one, and practice it relentlessly. Not to impress, not to prove, but to align with the strongest version of yourself. If this video gave you clarity, strength, or even discomfort, that's a sign you're growing. Like the video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom and share this with someone who needs to reclaim their self-respect. Walk calmly, stand firmly, and remember, when you master yourself, respect follows without effort. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. What if I told you that most sexless marriages don't begin with a lack of love, attraction, or even desire, but with small, ignored shifts you barely notice until silence replaces intimacy? What if the problem isn't her, isn't you, and isn't time itself, but patterns you've unknowingly reinforced for years? If you're watching this, chances are you feel it. The distance, the quiet rejection, the unspoken frustration you carry alone while pretending everything is fine. You might still live together, talk every day, share responsibilities, but something essential is missing. And the most dangerous part, you've started to believe this is just how marriage ends up. It doesn't. Stoic philosophy teaches that decay never happens all at once. It happens gradually through neglect, avoidance, and misplaced priorities. A sexless marriage is not a mystery, it's a signal, a warning, and more importantly, a chance to course correct before resentment hardens into permanence. In this video, I'll break down 10 uncomfortable but crucial reasons this happens, and why most men never see them coming. Watch until the very end, because the final reason is the one that quietly determines whether intimacy can ever return, or whether the distance becomes permanent. Number 1. Emotional disconnection and unresolved resentment. When intimacy disappears, it rarely vanishes overnight. It erodes quietly, almost politely, through emotional distance and resentment that was never named, never resolved, just carried. And here's the uncomfortable truth you need to hear. Desire cannot live where emotional safety has died. You can't fake closeness. You can't negotiate attraction. You can't logic your way back into intimacy if what sits between you and your partner is unspoken bitterness. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your inner world is full of quiet anger, disappointment, or suppressed hurt, it stains everything, including the bedroom. Resentment doesn't announce itself loudly. It builds when expectations go unmet and remain unaddressed. It grows when you swallow words to keep the peace, when you compromise your needs repeatedly, when you tell yourself it's not worth the argument. But every unspoken grievance doesn't disappear. It lodges itself into your nervous system. Over time, your body remembers what your mouth refused to say. Touch begins to feel unsafe. Vulnerability feels risky. Desire shuts down not out of spite but out of self-protection. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Translation: you must be willing to face discomfort, to say what you've been avoiding, to look clumsy and exposed, because silence is far more destructive than awkward honesty. Emotional disconnection isn't just about lack of communication. It's about misalignment of inner worlds. You can talk daily and still feel unseen. You can coexist efficiently and still feel lonely. When resentment sits unresolved, your nervous system stays on guard. Intimacy requires relaxation, and resentment creates tension. You may not consciously think about the old wounds anymore, but your body hasn't forgotten them. Stoicism teaches that suppressed emotion doesn't vanish. It governs you quietly. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." Unfaced emotional adversity doesn't harden you. It weakens your capacity for closeness. Now here's the empowering part. This is not a life sentence, but it does require action. Not blame, not keeping score. Action. Start with radical self-honesty. Ask yourself, without defensiveness, what resentment you're carrying. Not what your partner did wrong, but what you allowed to go unresolved. Where did you abandon your voice? Where did you betray your own needs? Stoicism is not about emotional suppression, it's about emotional clarity. You cannot heal what you refuse to name. Write it down. Not to accuse, to see it clearly. Because clarity dissolves confusion, and confusion is intimacy's greatest enemy. Next, train emotional courage. Courage isn't raising your voice, it's lowering your armor. It's choosing presence over withdrawal. Resentment thrives in avoidance, but intimacy grows in emotional exposure. Reminded himself, if it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. This isn't about tolerating emotional neglect. It's about enduring the discomfort of difficult conversations rather than the slow decay of connection. You don't need perfect words. You need sincerity. Speak from responsibility, not accusation. Focus on how you feel, not how they failed. This shifts the nervous system from threat to openness. You also need to release moral superiority. Resentment often survives because it gives you a sense of being right. But being right will never make you desired. Stoicism warns against ego disguised as virtue. Epictetus taught that peace comes from letting go of what you cannot control, including your partner's reactions. You speak your truth not to force change, but because integrity demands expression. When you release the need to win, something softer becomes possible. Desire responds to safety, not dominance. Now let's talk about daily practices, because insight without repetition fades. First, exercise, emotional inventory. Each evening, ask yourself one question: what did I feel today that I didn't express? Don't judge it, just observe it. This builds emotional awareness and prevents resentment from accumulating. Second, exercise, voluntary vulnerability. Once a day, express a genuine feeling without attaching blame or expectation. This retrains your nervous system to associate openness with safety rather than rejection. Third, exercise, resentment release. Sit quietly and repeat this line from Choose Not to Be Harmed, and you won't feel harmed. This doesn't excuse wrongdoing. It frees you from carrying poison that only harms you. Understand this deeply. Intimacy is not restored by seduction tactics or surface-level fixes. It returns when emotional tension dissolves, when resentment loosens its grip, when your presence feels grounded rather than guarded. Stoicism teaches mastery of the inner world first. When you stop reacting from old wounds, your energy shifts. You listen differently. You touch differently. You show up calmer, steadier, less needy. Desire responds to that stability. You are not powerless here. Emotional disconnection is not proof that love is dead. It's proof that unresolved emotions are asking to be acknowledged. And resentment, once faced, loses its authority. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Much of what blocks intimacy lives inside unexamined assumptions and silent narratives. When you confront them, they shrink. So take responsibility, not for the entire marriage, but for your inner discipline. Speak what you've been holding. Release what you've been gripping. Practice emotional honesty daily. Stoicism isn't cold detachment, it's warm clarity. And clarity, practiced consistently, rebuilds emotional safety. From there, intimacy doesn't need to be forced. It returns naturally as tension fades and connection finds room to breathe again. Number 2, chronic stress, burnout, and mental exhaustion. Chronic stress doesn't announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, settles into your nervous system, and slowly drains your capacity to feel desire, presence, and connection. You don't wake up one day deciding intimacy no longer matters. What happens instead is subtler and far more dangerous. Your mind stays switched on long after the day ends. Your body remains braced, tense, alert. And over time, the very system that's meant to experience pleasure goes offline. When stress becomes your baseline, intimacy becomes another demand instead of a refuge. Desire doesn't die because love disappears. It fades because exhaustion takes over. You live in a world that rewards constant output. Do more, push harder, stay available, solve everything now. That pressure doesn't just live in your schedule, it lives in your body. Stoicism understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts are saturated with deadlines, worries, and unresolved tension, your inner world reflects that chaos, and intimacy cannot thrive in a mind that never rests. You cannot access softness when your nervous system believes it's under siege. Burnout is especially deceptive because it disguises itself as responsibility. You tell yourself you're just tired, that things will improve later, that once the pressure eases, everything else will return naturally. But burnout doesn't wait politely for a vacation. It rewires your emotional responses. It flattens pleasure. It turns touch into effort. You begin to associate closeness with expectation, obligation, or another task you're failing to keep up with. And when intimacy starts to feel like work, avoidance becomes the body's defense mechanism. The Stoics were relentless about one truth. Most of our suffering comes from mismanaged attention. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Chronic stress is often the result of living everywhere except where you are. You replay conversations that already ended. You worry about outcomes that haven't arrived. You carry yesterday's frustrations into today's body. That mental noise leaves no room for desire. Desire requires presence. Presence requires calm. Calm requires discipline. Mental exhaustion is not just being tired. It's the inability to switch states. You remain in problem-solving mode even in moments meant for connection. Your body doesn't know the difference between a work crisis and an emotional one, it just registers threat. Elevated cortisol suppresses libido. Constant vigilance blocks playfulness. You don't feel broken, you feel numb. And numbness feels safer than disappointment. So you retreat, not because you don't care, but because caring feels too costly. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress desire or deny intimacy. It asks you to remove the internal chaos that suffocates it. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your mind is owned by stress, if your energy is scattered across 100 invisible battles, intimacy becomes collateral damage. Reclaiming desire begins with reclaiming sovereignty over your inner state. This is where action matters. Not dramatic gestures, not forcing attraction, but daily disciplined practices that calm the nervous system and restore agency. Start with a simple exercise the Stoics practiced constantly, separating what is within your control from what is not. Each evening, write down the worries looping in your mind. Then draw a line. On one side, list what you can influence through effort, boundaries, or choices. On the other, place what you cannot. Make it physical. Make it visible. This alone reduces mental load, because the mind relaxes when it knows not everything is its responsibility. Next, practice deliberate stillness. 5 minutes a day. No stimulation, no scrolling, no problem solving. Sit and breathe slowly, extending the exhale longer than the inhale. This tells your nervous system you are safe. You are not behind. You are not under attack. Reminded himself, nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. Stillness is not laziness. It is maintenance. Without it, intimacy has no soil to grow in. Another powerful habit is physical discharge of stress. Stoicism emphasized harmony between mind and body. Stress trapped in the body becomes resentment, irritability, and withdrawal. Move daily with intention, not to punish yourself, not to chase validation, but to release stored tension. When the body softens, desire follows naturally. You don't need to force anything. You simply remove what's blocking it. You must also confront the belief that exhaustion is noble. Burnout is not proof of commitment. It is evidence of misalignment. Seneca warned against this trap when he said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." If you give all your energy to survival, there is none left for connection. Start setting boundaries that protect your recovery. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It is essential. Intimacy requires surplus. You cannot give what you do not have. There is also an emotional component you must address honestly. Chronic stress often turns unspoken resentment inward. You may feel unseen, unsupported, or overwhelmed, but instead of articulating it, you shut down. Stoicism teaches clarity, not silence. Practice numbing your internal state without drama. Write it out. Strip it of blame. Focus on facts and sensations. This restores emotional circulation. Where emotion flows, desire has a pathway. Most importantly, stop treating intimacy as something you must get back. That framing alone adds pressure. Desire is not a switch you flip. It's a response to safety, presence, and vitality. When those return, intimacy follows without force. Epictetus advised, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Decide to become someone who protects their inner calm. The actions will align naturally. You are not broken. You are overloaded. And overload dulls even the strongest bonds. The Stoics believed that a tranquil mind was the foundation of a good life. Not a perfect life, a stable one. If you reduce the noise, regulate your energy, and reclaim mastery over your inner world, desire does not need to be chased. It reawakens on its own, quietly, steadily, like a signal returning once the interference is gone. Start today. One boundary, one moment of stillness, one conscious release of stress. Mental isn't built by enduring more pressure, it's built by refusing to let pressure rule you. When you do that, intimacy stops feeling like another demand and starts becoming what it was always meant to be, a place of rest, connection, and renewal. Number 3, loss of polarity and sexual tension. When intimacy dries up, it rarely disappears overnight. It fades quietly as polarity erodes. Sexual tension doesn't vanish because you stopped loving each other. It vanishes because the dynamic between you softened into something neutral, predictable, emotionally flat. And if you're honest with yourself, you can feel it. That edge that once existed, the contrast, the pull, the subtle friction, is gone. What remains is comfort without charge, familiarity without spark. You're still present, still loyal, still responsible, but something vital is missing. Stoicism teaches that nature thrives on balance, not sameness. When balance collapses, desire follows. Polarity is the invisible force created by contrast. It lives in presence, direction, decisiveness, emotional steadiness. When you abandon these qualities, often without realizing it, you don't just lose attraction, you lose tension. And tension is not conflict. It's energy. It's what keeps desire alive. When your mood rises and falls based on external approval, when you over-explain, over-accommodate, or seek reassurance instead of embodying certainty, the dynamic shifts. You move from grounded to reactive, from solid to negotiable. Stoics warned against this long before modern psychology ever named it. As Epictetus reminded, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Translation: stop chasing validation. Desire cannot grow in a space where approval-seeking dominates. You may believe being agreeable keeps the peace, but peace without polarity becomes stagnation. Sexual energy requires direction. It requires you to stand firm in who you are, not dissolve yourself into constant emotional availability. When everything about you becomes predictable, when your presence feels more like background noise than a force, attraction naturally retreats. This is not cruelty. It's biology aligned with psychology. Stoicism doesn't teach suppression, it teaches mastery. And mastery is deeply attractive. Loss of polarity often begins when you stop leading yourself. You stop honoring your boundaries, your discipline, your inner standards. Instead of acting from principle, you react from fear, fear of conflict, fear of withdrawal, fear of disapproval. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts are filled with anxiety about being desired, your energy reflects that neediness. And neediness suffocates tension. Desire needs space, mystery, self-possession. This doesn't mean becoming distant or cold. It means becoming centered, calm, unmoved by every emotional ripple. Stoicism calls this not apathy but freedom from emotional chaos. When you stop chasing responses and start embodying stability, polarity begins to return. Desire does not respond to pleading. It responds to presence. When you are emotionally regulated, when you don't overshare, or when you allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it, something shifts. The dynamic breathes again. You might notice that the more you try to fix the lack of intimacy through words, explanations, or reassurance, the worse it feels. That's because attraction isn't logical, it's experiential. Stoics understood this. They emphasized being over-persuading, character over performance. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And freedom, emotional, psychological, internal, is magnetic. When you reclaim that freedom, tension has room to re-emerge. Polarity also dies when roles blur into sameness. When everything becomes shared emotion, shared indecision, shared uncertainty. Desire thrives on contrast, not mirroring. Stoicism teaches you to occupy your lane with confidence, to stop apologizing for your nature, to act decisively, not defensively. When you hesitate, overconsult, or abandon your inner compass to keep harmony, you sacrifice polarity. And without polarity, intimacy becomes transactional or disappears entirely. Here, where action matters, insight alone changes nothing. Stoicism is a philosophy of practice. Start with a simple daily discipline. Practice restraint in expression, not silence, restraint. Speak with intention. Pause before responding emotionally. Let your presence do more than your words. Another exercise, remove one validation-seeking behavior each day. Notice where you seek reassurance, approval, or confirmation. Replace it with stillness. Let discomfort sharpen you, not soften you. Practice voluntary discomfort. Cold exposure, physical discipline, solitude, these are not punishments, they restore your sense of self-governance. When you feel grounded internally, you stop leaning outward for desire. That shift alone changes the dynamic. Advised, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Strength restores polarity, and polarity restores tension. Another practice, reclaim decisiveness. Make choices without excessive explanation, not from arrogance but from clarity. Certainty creates safety. Safety allows desire to surface. Also, detach outcome from effort. Do not act to get intimacy. Act because it aligns with your values. Desire follows authenticity, not strategy. Finally, stop measuring your worth through sexual response. Stoicism demands this detachment. When you free yourself from outcome dependency, you paradoxically become more desirable. because you're no longer negotiating your identity for approval. You stand as you are, composed, disciplined, emotionally sovereign. And that presence reintroduces the tension that intimacy feeds on. Loss of polarity is not permanent. It is a signal, a call to return to self-mastery. When you stop chasing desire and start embodying steadiness, when you trade emotional noise for calm authority, when you live from principle instead of reaction, tension has space to return. Not forced, not begged for, but naturally, as it always does when balance is restored. Number 4, overfamiliarity and routine killing desire. Overfamiliarity doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in quietly, disguised as comfort, efficiency, sameness. At first, routine feels safe, predictable, manageable. But over time, that same predictability dulls desire. Not because something is wrong with you or your partner, but because desire feeds on tension, polarity, and presence, and routine slowly starves all three. You stop seeing each other. You start anticipating instead of discovering. You know what comes next, so your body stops leaning forward. The Stoics warned about this long before modern psychology put words to it. Wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your days are dyed with sameness, your desire follows suit. You may not realize it, but familiarity without intention breeds emotional laziness. Not cruelty, not neglect, laziness of attention. You stop choosing each other actively and start coexisting passively. Conversations become logistical, touch becomes functional, presence becomes partial. Desire cannot survive in a space where nothing is at stake. When everything feels guaranteed, nothing feels earned. This is not about novelty for novelty's sake. It's about aliveness. Desire wants to feel met, not managed. And routine, when left unconscious, turns you into roommates sharing time instead of lovers sharing energy. Stoicism teaches that decay happens not through catastrophe but through neglect. Seneca warned, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Desire is no different. When you repeat the same patterns without awareness, you're quietly ending attraction while assuming it should magically persist. That assumption is the trap. You don't maintain desire by demanding it. You maintain it by becoming someone who generates it. And that begins with reclaiming intentionality in how you show up, physically, emotionally, energetically. You must understand this clearly. Routine itself is not the enemy. Unconscious routine is. The Stoics didn't reject structure, they mastered it. They believed discipline creates freedom. But discipline without reflection becomes rigidity. When your relationship runs on autopilot, desire checks out, not out of rebellion but boredom. The nervous system stops responding when nothing changes internally. You stop surprising yourself. And when you stop surprising yourself, you stop being surprising to anyone else. Ask yourself, when was the last time you showed up deliberately instead of conveniently? When did you last engage with presence instead of habit? Desire is deeply tied to awareness. Epictetus reminded us, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your actions are predictable because they're unconscious, you're not choosing, you're repeating. And repetition without intention is dead weight on attraction. Overfamiliarity also erodes polarity. When everything is shared, explained, exposed, and predictable, mystery dies. This doesn't mean secrecy. It means maintaining inner depth. It means not narrating every thought, not dissolving your individuality into the relationship. Stoicism values self-containment, strength, inner sovereignty. Desire responds to someone who is grounded in themselves, not merged into routine. When you stop cultivating your inner life, you stop generating energy. And desire is drawn to energy, not availability. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Comfort is seductive, but eros is demanding. Desire doesn't reward stagnation. It rewards presence, edge, and vitality. If your days look the same, feel the same, and require nothing new from you internally, Your body adapts by shutting down interest. This is biological and psychological, not moral, and it's reversible if you're willing to act instead of blame. The Stoics would never tell you to wait for desire to return. They would tell you to train your character until desire becomes a byproduct. Wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Applied here, waste no more time analyzing desire. Become someone who creates it, not through tricks, through discipline, through self-respect, through presence. Start with this practice. For the next 7 days, remove autopilot. Choose one daily interaction where you slow down fully. No multitasking, no rushing, no performance, just awareness. Feel your posture, your tone, your breath. Notice how presence alone changes the energy you bring into the room. This is Stoic mindfulness in action, not passive but embodied. Next, practice voluntary discomfort. The Stoics believed comfort weakens the soul. Do one thing daily that breaks your routine physically or mentally, not for excitement but for aliveness, cold exposure, intense exercise, silence, solitude. Challenge yourself. Desire responds to someone who is internally awake. When you sharpen yourself, you sharpen attraction indirectly. Another exercise, reclaim mystery by reclaiming depth. Spend time daily cultivating something that has nothing to do with your partner. Read, train, reflect, build. Desire grows when you are full, not when you are fused. Seneca said, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." Stop dissolving into routine togetherness. Maintain your edges. Also, audit your language. Routine language kills erotic tension. Speak less but with weight. Respond instead of reacting. Silence, when grounded, is powerful. The Stoics understood restraint as strength. Let your presence do more than your words. Desire often reignites not through more communication but through better containment. Finally, drop entitlement. Desire is not owed, it is invited. When you assume it should exist without maintenance, you unknowingly poison it. Gratitude, another Stoic cornerstone, reorients your energy. Approach intimacy as something you earn daily through who you are, not something you claim through commitment alone. This is not about fixing your partner, it's about mastering yourself. When routine dulls desire, the Stoic response is not complaint, it is correction. Internal first, always. Change your posture toward life and desire responds naturally. Not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. You don't need chaos, you need consciousness. You don't need novelty, you need presence. And when you choose intention over autopilot, desire doesn't have to be chased. It returns quietly, the same way it left, through attention. Number 5, poor communication about needs and boundaries. Poor communication about needs and boundaries doesn't usually announce itself loudly. It creeps in quietly, disguised as keeping the peace, as patience, as maturity. You tell yourself that silence is strength, that enduring discomfort is noble, that wanting less will somehow make things better. But over time, that silence hardens into distance. Desire doesn't die because love vanishes. It fades because clarity does. Intimacy requires truth, and when truth is, the body follows the mind into retreat. You may think you're being understanding by not expressing what you want. You may believe that avoiding difficult conversations protects the relationship. Yet Stoicism never taught avoidance. It taught courage. Wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Notice the simplicity. Needs unspoken are needs first by you, then by the relationship itself. When you don't communicate your boundaries, you silently train your partner to cross them. When you don't articulate desire, you slowly convince yourself you no longer have any. Sexlessness often grows where assumptions replace conversation. You assume your partner should just know. You assume your needs are inconvenient. You assume it's better to suppress than to disrupt. But assumptions rot intimacy from the inside. The Stoics warned against living in imagined narratives. Epictetus was blunt. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. When you assume rejection before you even speak, you pre-reject yourself. When you assume conflict is dangerous, you mistake discomfort for harm. Desire cannot survive in a space where honesty feels unsafe. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with clear instructions. When you don't set them, resentment fills the gap. You begin to withdraw emotionally. Your body follows. Sex becomes another unspoken tension rather than an expression of connection. And here's the quiet truth you may not want to face. When you don't respect your own needs, others unconsciously learn not to respect them either. Stoicism never advocated self-erasure. It demanded self-respect rooted in reason. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Freedom here isn't rebellion. It's the freedom to speak without fear of your own voice. Poor communication isn't just about words. It's about timing, tone, and inner clarity. If you don't know what you need, you can't communicate it. If you feel ashamed of wanting closeness, passion, or reassurance, that shame will leak into silence. Stoic discipline begins internally. Before speaking, you must examine yourself. Ask plainly, what do I need, not to control another person but to remain whole? This isn't selfish. It's grounded. Desire expressed calmly is not pressure. It's orientation. You may notice that when communication fades, sex becomes transactional or disappears entirely. Not because attraction is gone, but because tension has replaced trust. Stoicism teaches you to remove excess emotion from communication, not humanity. Calm truth is powerful. When you speak without accusation, without desperation, without fear, something shifts. The goal isn't to force intimacy. It's to create the conditions where it can return naturally. Clear boundaries create safety. Safety allows desire to breathe. There's also the habit of talking around needs instead of numbing them. Hinting, joking, withdrawing, waiting. None of these are communication. They're avoidance in softer clothing. The Stoics valued precision. Say what you mean what you say, not loudly, not dramatically, simply and directly. When you avoid clarity, you turn sex into a guessing game, and desire does not thrive in confusion. Take a moment to notice how often you censor yourself, how often you think it's not worth bringing up. That thought is rarely about peace. It's about fear, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of discovering that your needs might not be met. But avoiding truth doesn't prevent pain. It delays it, then compounds it. Stoicism asks you to face discomfort early while it's still manageable. No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity, Seneca wrote. Comfort without honesty is a fragile prosperity. Here's a practical exercise for you. Sit alone, no distractions. Write down what intimacy means to you now, not in theory, not in the past, but in your current body and mind. Don't justify it, don't edit it, just name it. Then write what boundaries protect that intimacy, what behaviors drain it, what silences erode it. This isn't for confrontation, it's for clarity. Stoics believed clarity precedes action. Next, practice verbalizing needs without emotional charge. Out loud, alone, calm voice, short sentences, no blame, no story, just truth. This trains your nervous system to associate honesty with steadiness instead of anxiety. When the moment comes to communicate, your body will already know how to stay grounded. Remember, you are responsible for your expression, not the reaction. Epictetus reminded us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Translation: say what matters even if it feels awkward. Another exercise: observe how often you violate your own boundaries internally, agreeing when you mean no, staying silent when something feels off. These small betrayals accumulate. Sexual desire cannot grow in a landscape where you abandon yourself daily. Reclaiming boundaries reignites self-respect. Self-respect reignites attraction, first within you, then between you. This isn't about demanding sex. It's about restoring polarity through truth. Intimacy is not owed, but neither is silence required. When you speak from calm authority rather than neediness, you change the dynamic. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop shrinking your desires to fit someone else's comfort. That alone shifts energy in ways words can't fully capture. Stoicism teaches that you control your actions, not outcomes. You may communicate clearly and still face resistance. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you acted with integrity. Mental is not getting what you want every time. It's knowing you did not abandon yourself to avoid discomfort. A sexless marriage sustained by silence is not stability, it's stagnation. So take action, speak with calm precision, define your needs without apology, set boundaries without anger, release the fantasy that unspoken love survives indefinitely. It doesn't. Truth is the oxygen of intimacy. Without it, desire suffocates quietly. With it, even difficult conversations become acts of strength. And strength, when practiced consistently, has a way of bringing life back to places that once felt dormant. Number 6. One partner feeling unappreciated or taken for granted. When one partner feels unappreciated or quietly taken for granted, intimacy doesn't disappear all at once. It fades in small, almost invisible ways. You may not notice it at first. There's no dramatic argument, no clear breaking point, just a slow emotional withdrawal. Touch becomes functional, desire becomes distant, and sex, which once felt natural, now feels optional, heavy, or strangely exhausting. This happens because appreciation isn't a luxury in a relationship, it's oxygen. Without it, closeness suffocates. As wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." The small daily signals you send, your tone, your attention, your presence, echo loudly in the emotional body of your partner, even when nothing is said out loud. When appreciation disappears, the unappreciated partner doesn't suddenly stop caring. They stop offering, they stop initiating, they stop leaning forward emotionally, not out of spite but out of fatigue. Giving without being seen drains the spirit, and desire cannot survive where effort feels invisible. You may still share a house, a routine, even laughter, but beneath that surface something essential is missing. Sex is deeply tied to feeling chosen, valued, and emotionally safe. When someone feels reduced to a role instead of recognized as a person, attraction slowly retreats. Seneca warned, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." Gratitude isn't just polite, it's bonding. Without it, distance becomes the default. What makes this dynamic especially dangerous is that it often feels unintentional. You may believe love should be understood without being expressed. You may assume consistency equals appreciation. But the Stoics were clear. Intention does not replace action. Epictetus reminded us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Love works the same way. If appreciation lives only in your head, it might as well not exist. And when one partner feels unseen long enough, their nervous system adapts. They stop expecting warmth. They stop associating closeness with reward. The body learns faster than the mind. Libido doesn't respond to logic, it responds to emotional conditions. Over time, the unappreciated partner may begin to feel emotionally alone while technically together. And when emotional solitude sets in, sexual desire has nowhere to land. Intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires safety. Feeling taken for granted erodes that safety. It sends a quiet message. Your effort is expected, not valued. That message hardens the heart, not consciously, automatically. And once the heart closes, the body follows. Stoicism teaches radical responsibility here. Not blame, responsibility. Again, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Silence can be untrue too. Silence can misrepresent care. You may be tempted to focus on frequency, techniques, or timing, but those are surface fixes. The deeper issue is emotional reciprocity. Desire thrives when appreciation flows both ways. Without it, sex feels transactional or burdensome. This is why pressure never works. You cannot demand desire from someone who feels emotionally depleted. Stoicism teaches you to look inward first. Ask yourself where you've grown comfortable instead of attentive, where you've replaced presence with assumption, where you've allowed routine to dull reverence. Comfort is useful, but unchecked comfort becomes neglect, and neglect, even unintentional, kills attraction. This is where action matters more than insight. Begin with deliberate appreciation, not grand gestures, not performative words, but consistent recognition. Train yourself to notice effort, not just outcomes, but intention. Stoics practiced active attention. Apply that here. Attention is appreciation in motion. Each day, make it a discipline to mentally note what your partner contributes emotionally and practically. Then express it simply, not dramatically, clearly, calmly. Let your tone carry sincerity, not expectation. You are not trying to get sex. You are restoring dignity. Desire often returns as a side effect of feeling respected. A powerful Stoic exercise you can adopt is negative visualization. Briefly imagine life without your partner's presence, not to induce fear but clarity. This practice sharpens gratitude. When you return from that mental exercise, speak from that awareness. Appreciation expressed from clarity feels different. It lands deeper. Another exercise is restraint. Resist correcting, fixing, or dismissing for one full day. Observe instead. This builds respect in your nervous system. When respect grows internally, it shows externally, and your partner will feel it long before you explain it. You should also examine entitlement, the silent killer of intimacy. Entitlement says love is owed, desire is owed, sex is owed. Stoicism rejects this mindset completely. Nothing external is owed to you, not affection, not attraction, not intimacy. Epictetus was blunt. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, rather, wish that what happens happens the way it happens. This doesn't mean passivity, it means humility. When you release entitlement, appreciation becomes genuine again. And genuine appreciation reopens emotional doors that pressure slammed shut. As appreciation returns, so does polarity. When someone feels valued, they relax. When they relax, they open. When they open, desire finds space to breathe again. This is not manipulation, it's alignment. Sexless marriages are rarely about sex. They are about emotional misalignment left unattended for too long. The good news is that appreciation is a skill, not a personality trait. You can train it. You can practice it. You can embody it daily. End each day with a brief Stoic reflection. Ask yourself, where did I acknowledge effort today? Where did I overlook it? No judgment, just awareness. Improvement follows awareness naturally. As said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts shift toward gratitude, your behavior will follow. And when behavior changes consistently, emotional climate changes. Desire does not need to be chased. It returns when the conditions are right. You don't fix a sexless marriage by focusing on sex. You fix it by restoring appreciation where it withered. Start there, quietly, intentionally, persistently. Let action speak before words, and remember, what you nourish grows. Number 7. Power imbalance and lack of respect. When a marriage turns sexless, it's rarely just about the physical. Beneath the silence, the cold distance, and the awkward avoidance lies something deeper, something that drains connection at the root. One of the most potent reasons, a power imbalance paired with a lack of respect. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably felt it too. That slow erosion of equality, that nagging feeling that your voice doesn't carry the same weight anymore, or that your needs have started to feel like a burden instead of a priority. Don't ignore it. Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "You deserve to desire only that which is within your power to control." When you surrender your sense of agency in a relationship, you also quietly surrender the spark that keeps it alive. And over time, that surrender manifests not just emotionally, but intimately. Now let's be real. When one person holds more control, whether financially, emotionally, or socially, it creates a subtle hierarchy. The dynamic shifts. You may start walking on eggshells, compromising too much, fearing confrontation. The other person, knowingly or not, begins to expect that compliance. And guess what gets buried under all that imbalance? Attraction. Passion can't thrive where freedom dies. Respect is the soil where desire grows. When that soil is polluted with resentment or passivity, nothing beautiful can blossom. And if you're wondering why your partner seems uninterested in being close, the answer might not be about them withdrawing. It might be about how much space you've allowed them to dominate. You need to reclaim equilibrium, not by demanding or blaming, but by resetting your internal compass. A Stoic doesn't beg for respect, they embody it. You must start showing up with the quiet strength of someone who knows their worth. Speak with clarity. Set boundaries, not ultimatums. Stop justifying yourself for wanting intimacy. It's not weakness, it's a basic human need. If you're being emotionally dismissed, you don't need to yell louder. You need to withdraw your energy until you're met with mutual effort. That doesn't mean playing games. It means not entertaining one-sidedness. Your presence should be a choice, not an obligation. When your absence speaks louder than your arguments, people listen. Seneca wisely said, "He who is brave is free." You need the bravery to face discomfort, to stop pretending everything is fine, to stop tolerating power games that kill attraction. Many couples fall into the trap of unspoken roles, where one gives, the other takes, one initiates, the other avoids, one submits, the other controls. If that sounds familiar, here's your wake-up call. Intimacy isn't sustainable in a dictatorship, even a quiet one. You want passion, then build parity. Mutual effort. Mutual emotional safety, mutual respect. Without it, you're just roommates pretending not to feel the distance. Now take a moment. Reflect on how often you've given in just to avoid conflict. How many times have you said it's okay when it was? How often have you felt ignored but brushed it off to keep the peace? That's not noble, it's self-erasure. And it has consequences. Every time you silence yourself, you chip away at your identity. Every time you avoid asserting your needs, you condition your partner to believe you have none. And when you become invisible in your own relationship, attraction vanishes. Not because you're undeserving, but because you've stopped showing up with strength. Start rebalancing today. Speak your truth with calm firmness. Drop the need to convince. Stop explaining your worth, it's not a debate. Instead, embody it in the way you carry yourself. Practice stillness when provoked. Withdraw when disrespected. Appreciate your own presence enough to not chase someone else's validation. When you begin to restore your inner balance, the outer dynamics will shift. You'll either witness your partner rise to meet you or reveal their unwillingness to. Either way, you win, because you're no longer participating in a structure where you feel small. You're standing tall, not with aggression, but with conviction. Remember, said, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. So don't mimic manipulation with more manipulation. Respond with poise. Build a life that excites you, independently of how someone else shows up. And in doing so, you'll reset the power dynamic, not through control, but through self-possession. If your marriage has become sexless due to this imbalance, you have more influence than you think. But it starts from within. Power doesn't have to be taken, it can be reclaimed. Respect doesn't have to be demanded, it can be commanded through presence. Practice showing up differently. Change the tone of the conversation. Show restraint where you used to react. Set a boundary where you used to bend. Offer your presence, not as a favor, but as a gift. One that should be received with gratitude, not entitlement. Want a practical exercise? For the next 7 days, don't complain, don't chase, don't emotionally beg, instead observe. Journal moments when you feel dismissed. Document how often you overgive. Then shift. Replace explanation with action. Replace emotion with clarity. Replace reaction with stillness. And slowly you'll notice, when you rebalance your inner posture, the relationship dynamic responds. This isn't about becoming cold, it's about becoming conscious. A Stoic knows you cannot control another's behavior, but you can always control how you respond to it. You deserve a relationship where love flows both ways, where intimacy is shared, not rationed, where respect isn't a reward, it's a baseline. Don't settle for a dynamic that shrinks you. Step back into your power. And if that feels unfamiliar, remember, it's not because you lost it. It's because you forgot how to stand in it. Reclaim it, reignite it, redefine what you allow. Your marriage might be sexless, but your spirit doesn't have to be. Begin again with strength. Number 8, suppressed anger, criticism, or passive aggression. Suppressed anger doesn't vanish just because you ignore it. It sinks inward, it calcifies, and over time it quietly poisons desire. You may not shout, you may not slam doors, you may even tell yourself you're being mature by letting things go. But the body never forgets what the mouth refuses to say. Sexual intimacy requires openness, warmth, and a sense of safety. Suppressed resentment creates the opposite. It turns closeness into tension and touch into obligation. You feel it in the silence between words, in the hesitation before a glance, in the way affection starts to feel mechanical instead of alive. What you suppress doesn't disappear, it waits, and it expresses itself through distance. Criticism works the same way. When anger can't come out honestly, it leaks sideways. Sarcasm replaces sincerity. Passive aggression replaces clarity. You start correcting instead of connecting, judging instead of understanding. Each small jab may seem harmless, even justified, but they stack up. Over time, desire withers under constant evaluation. Nobody feels sexually open when they feel measured, analyzed, or quietly resented. The Stoics understood this deeply. Wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." When your inner world is hostile, the shared space becomes sterile. Intimacy cannot grow in emotional soil filled with unspoken bitterness. You might tell yourself the problem is physical, stress, time, fatigue, but often the real issue lives upstream in unresolved emotional friction. The body follows the mind. When anger is suppressed, the nervous system stays tense. Desire requires relaxation. Passion requires presence. Resentment keeps you braced, guarded, internally rigid. Even when the opportunity for intimacy appears, something in you pulls back, not consciously, automatically. This is why sexless marriages often aren't about sex at all. They're about emotions that never got air. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach suppression. It teaches clarity. There's a difference. Epictetus warned that emotions left unexamined rule us from the shadows. When you refuse to name your anger, it names your behavior instead. It decides how you show up, how you touch, how you withdraw. You may think you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is trading short-term comfort for long-term disconnection. Peace built on silence is fragile. It cracks quietly. If you want intimacy to return, you must first reclaim honesty with yourself. That doesn't mean emotional explosions or blame. It means courage. It means admitting privately at first that you're angry, that you're hurt, that something inside you feels unheard or dismissed. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Suppressed anger is suffering in advance every day without relief. Numbing it reduces its power, writing it down, sitting with it, feeling it without judgment. This is not weakness, it is discipline. From there, you must retrain how you express discontent. Passive aggression feels safer, but it erodes trust. Directness, when paired with calm, rebuilds it. The Stoics emphasize speaking from reason, not impulse. That means stating what you feel without attacking character. It means owning your internal state instead of making it someone else's crime. This alone begins to soften the emotional atmosphere. Desire doesn't respond to pressure. It responds to safety. You also need to release the fantasy that your partner should just know what you're feeling. That belief keeps anger bottled. Stoicism rejects mind reading and entitlement. It asks you to focus on what is within your control, your words, your tone, your boundaries. When you choose clarity over silence, you reclaim agency. You stop outsourcing your emotional life to expectation and disappointment. This shift alone changes how you carry yourself. And desire is deeply responsive to presence and self-possession. There's a practical exercise here. Each day, ask yourself one question. What am I tolerating that I secretly resent? Don't explain it away. Don't justify it, just name it. Then ask a second question. What would calm, self-respecting expression look like here? You don't need to act immediately. The goal is awareness. Another exercise is voluntary restraint. When you feel the urge to criticize, pause, breathe. Replace the impulse to correct with a statement of feeling. This trains emotional honesty without aggression. Over time, your nervous system learns that truth doesn't require conflict. Another Stoic practice is negative visualization, not to breed pessimism but to sharpen appreciation. Imagine continuing as you are, years of emotional distance, polite routines, no spark, no hunger. Let that image sober you. Then imagine the alternative, an atmosphere where resentment is aired early, calmly, without venom, where desire isn't blocked by emotional debris. This contrast isn't meant to scare you, it's meant to wake you up. Sexual intimacy is not sustained by technique or timing. It's sustained by emotional cleanliness. Suppressed anger is emotional clutter. Clear it and desire has room to return, not instantly, not magically, but naturally. As reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The very anger you've been avoiding is the doorway back to connection, if you have the courage to face it, name it, and express it with discipline. This is your work, not to be louder, not to be harsher, but to be truer. Start today. Sit with what you've been avoiding. Write it. Breathe through it. Practice speaking without poison. Desire doesn't need to be chased, it needs space. Clear the emotional blockages and what felt dead may begin to move again. Number 9. Decline in self-care, confidence or attraction. At some point, often without a dramatic moment or a clear decision, something quietly slips. Not just desire, not just excitement, but the energy you once carried into the relationship, the way you moved through the world, the way you inhabited your own body and mind. A sexless marriage is rarely born from one argument or one bad phase. More often, it grows out of neglect, subtle, gradual, almost invisible neglect of yourself. And if you're honest with yourself, you can feel it. Not as shame, but as a dull awareness that you stopped showing up as the strongest version of you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Attraction doesn't respond to words or promises. It responds to embodiment. When self-care erodes, when confidence softens into complacency, when discipline dissolves into comfort, desire doesn't disappear out of cruelty. It fades because it no longer has something solid to attach itself to. You don't lose attraction overnight. You drift away from it by letting yourself drift away from your own standards. Self-care is not vanity. It is self-respect made visible. When you stop taking care of your body, your posture, your sleep, your movement, your presence, you're not just sending a signal outward, you're sending one inward. You're telling yourself that you're no longer worth the effort. Wrote, if you don't do what's right, don't expect strength. Confidence is built from repeated proof. Every small promise you keep to yourself reinforces your internal authority. Every promise you break erodes it. And intimacy can sense that erosion long before words are spoken. Attraction thrives on polarity, energy, presence, grounded certainty. When you abandon self-care, your nervous system dulls. Your eyes lose sharpness. Your voice loses steadiness. You become less embodied, more passive, more inwardly scattered. Desire doesn't respond to neediness or stagnation. It responds to grounded vitality. Stoicism never taught withdrawal from life. It taught mastery of oneself within it. Seneca reminded us, "He who indulges in sloth is his own enemy." When you stop investing in yourself, you quietly become that enemy. Confidence doesn't come from domination or bravado. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, you radiate calm certainty. When they don't, insecurity leaks out through hesitation, through resentment, through unspoken expectations. Sexual energy is deeply tied to this alignment. If you feel disconnected from your own strength, your body registers it before your mind does. And intimacy becomes another place where that disconnection shows up as avoidance, tension, or silence. You might tell yourself you're tired, busy, stressed, overwhelmed, and sometimes that's true. But Stoicism asks a harder question. Are you disciplined or are you negotiating with comfort? Wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." When you live as if there will always be more time, standards erode. When you live as if your time and vitality matter now, presence returns. Desire follows presence. This is not about pleasing your partner. That's a trap. Desire cannot be begged into existence. It must be invited by becoming solid again, grounded again, alive again. When you reclaim self-care, confidence returns as a side effect, not a goal. You stop seeking validation and start generating gravity, and gravity is attractive. There's also resentment hiding here, resentment toward yourself. When you neglect your health, your body carries the weight. When you neglect your growth, your mind stiffens. That resentment doesn't stay silent. It seeps into how you touch, how you speak, how you withdraw. The Stoics believe that inner disorder always reveals itself outwardly. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A sexless marriage often mirrors a deeper loss of self-mastery. The good news is that this is reversible. Immediately, not someday, now, but not through dramatic gestures, through quiet daily discipline. Through rebuilding trust with yourself first. Start with the body. Move it daily, not to impress, but to inhabit it again. Treat movement as a ritual, not a task. Eat in a way that supports clarity, not numbness. Sleep like it matters, because it does. These are not lifestyle tips. They are acts of self-alignment. Next, rebuild confidence by keeping small, non-negotiable promises. One habit, one commitment, done daily. No debate. Confidence grows where consistency lives. You don't need motivation, you need rhythm. Seneca advised, begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life. Today is not preparation, it is the work. Practice deliberate presence. When you speak, speak fully. When you listen, listen without waiting to respond. When tension arises, don't flee into distraction. Stay, breathe. Ground yourself. This presence changes how you're felt in a room. Attraction responds to felt presence, not effort. Here's a practical exercise. Each morning, ask yourself one question. What would a self-respecting version of me do today? Not the perfect version, the honest one. Then do one thing that aligns with that answer. One thing only. Stack those days. Watch how your posture changes, your voice, your patience, your energy. Another exercise, remove one comfort that dulls you. Not forever, just temporarily. Replace it with something that sharpens you, movement, silence, reflection. Voluntary discomfort was a core Stoic practice because it restores authority over the self. When you prove to yourself that you can endure discomfort, confidence returns naturally. And finally, stop outsourcing your vitality. Attraction dies where responsibility is shifted outward. You are not owed desire. You cultivate it by cultivating yourself. Said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Let yours be disciplined, grounded, alive. A sexless marriage is not always about sex. Often it's about absence of presence, of vitality, of self-respect. Reclaim those and everything else begins to move again. Not through force, through alignment, through becoming unbreakable quietly from the inside out. Number 10, sex becoming an obligation instead of desire. When sex turns into an obligation, something quiet but corrosive happens inside the marriage. Not all at once, not dramatically. It happens the way rust forms, slow, unseen, almost polite. You start feeling that intimacy is no longer chosen, it's scheduled. Not desired but owed, not pulled by hunger but pushed by duty. And the moment desire is replaced by obligation, the body may still comply, but the soul checks out. You can feel it. The energy is different. The warmth is thinner. The connection feels rehearsed, transactional, empty. You're no longer being wanted, you're being tolerated. And deep down, that does something to you. The Stoics understood this dynamic better than we give them credit for. Wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." When intimacy becomes a task, the hive suffers. Desire cannot be commanded. It cannot be guilted into existence. The moment sex becomes something you're expected to perform to keep peace, avoid conflict, or check a marital box, it stops being an expression of life force and becomes a chore. And chores do not awaken longing. They drain it. You don't crave what feels compulsory. You avoid it. You resent it, even if you don't say it out loud. You may notice that the more sex is discussed as a problem, the less erotic it becomes. The more it's negotiated, measured, tracked, or weaponized, the colder it feels. Desire is spontaneous by nature. Obligation is mechanical. And when the bedroom turns into a space of unspoken pressure where one person feels chased and the other feels evaluated, attraction quietly suffocates. You stop approaching intimacy with curiosity. You approach it with calculation. And calculation kills chemistry. From a Stoic lens, the issue isn't sex itself. It's attachment. Attachment to validation. Attachment to reassurance. Attachment to using intimacy as proof of worth, love, or security. Epictetus warned, if you want to be invincible, make sure you depend on nothing that lies outside your control. Desire is not something you can demand or extract. The more you try to control it, the more it slips away. When sex becomes an obligation, it's usually because one or both of you are trying to regulate emotions, fear, insecurity, loneliness, through physical closeness instead of inner stability. You can feel when sex is no longer an expression of desire but a tool for emotional regulation. It carries weight, expectation, silent contracts. The body senses that pressure immediately. Desire doesn't bloom under surveillance. It emerges in freedom, in polarity, in emotional safety without emotional debt. When intimacy becomes something you should do instead of something you want to do, the nervous system rebels. Withdrawal becomes a form of self-protection. What makes this especially dangerous is how normal it becomes. Obligation sex doesn't always involve refusal. Sometimes it involves compliance without enthusiasm, presence without hunger, touch without intention. And over time, that creates a feedback loop. One side feels undesired, the other feels pressured. Both feel misunderstood, both retreat. And the bed becomes a place of quiet disappointment instead of connection. Stoicism doesn't tell you to suppress desire. It tells you to understand it, to remove false stories around it. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests gold, misfortune tests the brave." A sexless marriage tests your relationship with desire itself. Are you seeking intimacy to feel chosen, or are you becoming someone who naturally inspires choice? Are you chasing closeness out of fear of loss, or are you grounded enough to let desire come to you freely? Obligation is often a symptom of fear, masquerading as responsibility. Here, where action begins, not outward pressure but inward correction. The first habit is reclaiming your self-command. You stop treating sex as a measure of your worth. You stop negotiating desire. You stop pleading silently for enthusiasm. Instead, you cultivate a life that is full, grounded, disciplined, and internally rich. Desire responds to gravity, not desperation. When you no longer need sex to feel whole, you become more attractive, energetically, emotionally, and psychologically. A simple Stoic exercise you can practice daily is voluntary detachment. For a period of time, remove sex from your internal bargaining system entirely, not as punishment, not as withdrawal, but as liberation. Tell yourself, I do not pursue desire, I become worthy of it. This doesn't mean emotional coldness, it means calm presence. You engage without expectation, you touch without agenda, you speak without fishing, you allow space without fear. This alone often shifts the entire emotional field. Another practice is to audit your intentions. Before initiating or responding to intimacy, ask yourself, silently, am I doing this to give or to get? If the answer is to get reassurance, closeness, or validation, pause, breathe, regulate yourself first. Stoicism teaches emotional self-sufficiency, not emotional starvation. When intimacy is no longer a transaction, it has room to become playful again, alive again, chosen again. You also train non-neediness through discipline outside the bedroom, physical training, mental focus, solitude, purpose-driven work. The Stoics believe that mastery in one area strengthens mastery in all others. When your identity expands beyond the relationship, the pressure inside it decreases. Desire doesn't thrive in claustrophobia. It thrives in polarity, two whole individuals choosing each other, not clinging to each other. There's a paradox here that's uncomfortable but powerful. The less you require sex to feel secure, the more likely it is to return organically. Obligation dissolves when pressure dissolves, and pressure dissolves when you reclaim emotional sovereignty. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Sexlessness often isn't about libido. It's about emotional dynamics that quietly extinguish desire. End each day with a short reflection. Ask yourself, did I show up today from strength or from need? Did I try to extract something or did I embody something? This isn't about blame, it's about clarity. Stoicism isn't cold, it's clean. It removes the emotional clutter that suffocates intimacy and replaces it with calm confidence. When sex stops being an obligation, it can slowly become a choice again. Not forced, not negotiated, not demanded, chosen. And that shift doesn't begin in the bedroom, it begins in you. Before you close this video, remember this one Stoic truth from: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. A sexless marriage is rarely about the bedroom. It's about what slowly disappeared long before intimacy did: presence, polarity, self-respect, emotional leadership. And the uncomfortable truth is this: nothing changes until you do. Not by begging, not by arguing, not by chasing desire that can't survive desperation, but by reclaiming your composure, your standards, and your inner authority. If this video made you uncomfortable, that's a good sign. Discomfort is where clarity lies. You now see patterns you may have ignored for years. You recognize habits that quietly drained attraction. And most importantly, you now understand that intimacy is not something you demand. It's something you invite through who you become. The Stoics believe that a man who governs himself influences everything around him. When you rebuild your discipline, your calm confidence, your boundaries, and your sense of purpose, the dynamic shifts, whether your partner responds or not. And that shift alone changes your future. So don't just move on to the next video and forget this moment. Reflect, apply, choose one insight from today and live it consistently. If this resonated with you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs this message but won't hear it anywhere else. Your marriage and your life doesn't change by accident. It changes by decision.